So good day, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and welcome to the second day of our two overlapping conferences, the 7th Annual International Conference on Communication and Management and the 3rd International Conference on Education. Today we have two different panels, the first one on political communication and the second on teaching languages. Then a roundtable discussion with the theme Learning and Teaching in Time of Crisis in collaboration with the Royal Holloway University of London and Kaplan, Singapore. And we finished the day with two workshops, the first on academic writing in graduate studies, led by Catherine Derry, a PhD candidate from the Faculty of Education, University of Ottawa, Canada, and the second one on leadership in academia, how we can become better academics, led by Michael Altamirano, professor in King Graduate School, Monroe College, USA, and Vice President of Strategic Management of our Institute, and Caroline Recan-Monroe, Professor of Leadership from the Faculty of Management, Royal Roads University, Canada, and Vice President of Leadership Development of our Institute. I would like to thank the participants of yesterday, first day of the conference. I personally have had a fabulous time, and it was a day full of sharing knowledge. And thank you for your emails, positive mostly, but we are also ready to listen to every negative comment that you might have. And I welcome Jean Bamford, professor and acting deputy dean, head of students' experience and academic outcomes, co-director of the Higher Education Research Group, London Metropolitan University, that will lead this third panel on political communication. Jean, the floor is yours to introduce the panel presenters.
Thank you, Margarita, and welcome everyone. Kalimera, it's good to be here. Thank you so much. It's my great honor to chair this session, so thank you so much. I take it we're doing the same as yesterday, 15 minutes and then 5 minutes for questions. So colleagues, if you could try and keep to time, and hopefully we'll have some time left at the end to pick up any additional comments and discussion. Yesterday was fantastic. Thank you, Margarita. We had some really good discussion, some real intellectual engagement, and I hope today is going to be the same. And I think we're setting the tone this morning with this session on political communication, which of course is so important. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Martha Kyriakou. He's going to talk to us about fear appeals as compliance in the televised address of Mr. Mitsotakis regarding COVID-19. So Martha, would you like to upload your slides? And off you go. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, you can.
Okay, perfect. So, hi to everyone. I'd like, first of all, to thank the organizers of this conference for giving me the chance to be here. I'm Martha Kyriakou, and I'd like to present to you our research with Mr. Emanuel Takas, which is, as you can see on the screen, fear appeals as compliance in the televised addresses of Mr. Mitsotakis regarding COVID-19. The objective of this research is to analyze the 10 televised addresses broadcasted between 11th March and 31st October 2020. That is during the first two waves of COVID in Greece, of the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis regarding the pandemic arguments based on fear as demands for compliance. Undoubtedly, the central feature of the pandemic's impact on psychology is fear. But what is fear? Fear is a natural, powerful, and primitive feeling. it acts as a signal of danger and threat, and it causes appropriate adaptive responses. About fear and COVID, polls saw a sharp increase in fear and anxiety related to the pandemic, and at the same time, 4 areas of fear were identified. The first one, fear of health, fear of fellow human beings, fear due to ignorance of the virus, and fear of inactivity. Moreover, the constant media coverage of the pandemic is associated with increased fear, as the threat is unprecedented, invisible, and potential deadly. Now, this fear induced safety behaviors such as hand washing, quarantines. However, it was noticed that...
Marta, sorry to interrupt, your slides are not moving.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If you click on the
Yes, just
the box with the line at the bottom on the right, there, the bottom line, you should get a full screen view, and then you should be able to forward them, Martha.
Martha, try and hit F5, so it will go to full screen.
Okay, can you see moving?
No.
No.
Okay, I don't know why.
You see the bottom line there. There is little boxes. When you come to the box with the little T thing on the bottom, that's full screen, just before the slider. There, yeah, that's it.
This one.
Yeah.
And now it's moving?
no.
No, I don't know why. Okay.
But don't worry.
Now it does.
Hold on now. Hold on.
Can I just click here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think we're here, where I said that this fear induced safety behaviors such as hand washing, quarantines. However, it was noticed that insufficient fear endangers individuals and society as people ignoring government measures. And when fear is excessive, this can be harmful for people's health. Then I'll move on to fear appeal, which is a persuasive communication that aims to arouse fear by presenting a threatening message with an unpleasant consequence in order for the audience to adopt the recommended response and change their behavior. Therefore, the message includes a significant threat or problem and suggestions to reduce the threat. After that, we have compliance, which is the tendency of a person to change his attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors according to those of the people around him or her, and it can take the form of obvious social pressure or subtler unconscious influence. And then we'll consider the structure of phobic arguments. Communicators convey a message that is usually not pleasant to those whose behavior they're trying to modify by that message. And the structure of the phobic argument is this. Major contingent: if P does not do A, then B will follow. Minor contingent: B is very bad for the P, therefore B must stop if possible. But the only way to stop it is to do A. Conclusion: therefore A must succeed. Now we have the phobic threat argument, where the listener is aware that the speaker may cause the threat in question. And the structure of the phobic threat argument is as follows. Major contingent: if you do or don't do A, negative consequences B will occur. Minor contingent: I can cause consequences B if you proceed or don't proceed with A, and I will assure you. Conclusion: do or don't do A for the above reasons. And lastly, we have the phobic risk argument, which is the chances of a risk materializing, and the structure is this. Major contingent, if you do or don't do A, negative consequences B will occur. Minor contingent, the chances of the negative consequences B being caused to me are enough. Conclusion, I should not do A for the above reasons. Next, we have the methodology, which is a qualitative content analysis of the Prime Minister's speeches from March 11th to October 31st from 2020. After a detailed reading of these 10 speeches, our goal was to identify phobic arguments and then record the structure and the type of them. For example, if it is a fear, a threat, or a risk. And here I'd like to show you one example of its appeal. The full statement of the speech was, avoid crowded places where the disease is more easily spread. We do not want to harm ourselves and those we love. And major contingent, avoid crowded places where the disease is more easily transmitted, the A, as we can harm ourselves and those we love, the B. Minor contingent, B is very dangerous and should be avoided. Conclusion, thus we follow the measures according to A, and this is appeal to fear. The next full statement was, this is why new restrictions will follow, and we should also discipline those who behave antisocially. Major contingent, unless new restrictions follow, and unless we also discipline, the A, those who behave antisocially will be punished exemplary, the B. Minor contingent, consequences, the B, may occur if recommendations, the A, are not followed. Conclusion, therefore, do A for the above reasons, and this is appeal to threat. And last one, the statement was, however, some of our fellow citizens, especially the elderly and those suffering from chronic diseases, may need hospitalization. We must protect them first of all. Major contingent, we must protect them, the elderly citizens, first of all, A, as some of our fellow citizens, especially the elderly and those suffering from chronic diseases, may need hospitalization. Minor contingent, the chances of B happening are quite high as we're talking about vulnerable groups. Conclusion, therefore, A must be carried out, appeal to risk. And then I'll take you through findings. As you can see on your screen, there is at least one phobic argument in every speech. Either it is an appeal to fear, to risk or threat. So 33 phobic arguments are identified. So the initial hypothesis is confirmed, and specific formal characteristics are identified as well, such as the size of the threat, and you can see the full statement below. The possibility of its realization, the association with the public, the dramatization of the threat, and the last one, the report of proposals to avoid the risk. Beyond the initial hypothesis, the first research question, to what extent position of power use phobic arguments in order to reinforce an already existing fear of the public to achieve ulterior goals, is confirmed, as with strong expressions, the citizens are possessed by ignorance towards this unusual experience, and thus the fear is created, which reinforced through the speeches to achieve compliance to the government's instructions. And the second research question, what, if any, are the proposed and effective solutions for dealing with a threat or risk, is also confirmed, as almost all phobic arguments refer to proposed solutions, and in this way the citizens realize that there is a way to manage the threat. And finally, we complete with the final conclusions, where the ultimate purpose of the use of phobic arguments in this communication game is the public compliance with the government's instructions. At the same time, the uncertainty and the dramatization of threat increases the fear levels of the citizens. And in order to achieve compliance, solutions are given to reduce or eliminate the threat. Here are the limitations of the research, which are the non-existence of Greek bibliography. There is a limited number of studies, as most are either ongoing or do not address a similar topic, and other sources such as press releases and official announcements were not studied. And our suggestions for future research is an extensive analysis in the following prime ministerial speeches, especially after the appearance of the vaccines. And the results of this research could be the starting point for a Greek research on the use of phobic arguments in other political speeches, as the Greek research in this context is limited. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Martha. That's very interesting indeed. I'm going to open it up to our audience for any questions. I'm not sure if I see anything at the moment in the chat. Could anybody who's got a question raise their hands? I've certainly got questions, so one of the things I think, Martha, for me is very interesting because, so thank you for doing this research. I think it's quite important, simply because I noticed the fear statements in our own politicians in the UK. They were used frequently. So I think you've certainly proved that. And it's interesting. So I wondered if you thought about expanding your research to more international context, to just compare what politicians spoke like in different countries, because certainly in the UK, I think you would find the phobic statements frequent, extreme, and the threat levels, I don't know what it was like in Greece, but the threat levels were significant. So I think there's some more, you can take that research further. I don't know if anybody else has got a question that they would like to, and I don't know if you've thought about that or even it's something that you want to do, but I think that another thing that I would like to ask you about, what was do you think the impact of those phobic statements on the Greek population?
I don't know if it was good for society, because we have both sides. Some of the people was like, no, this is propaganda. We don't want to follow the instructions, probably because of the low fear size. And then on the other side, we have the full anxiety, full fear, full protective citizens. So I don't know if these speeches was they have the right. I can remember the word. Sorry.
That's all right.
I don't know if Prime Minister did this to follow the instructions, all the citizens, but probably most of them was like, no, I think it's propaganda, so I don't want to follow the instructions. And then we have the other side of anxiety, fear, stress problems. So yeah, I don't know if it was a success.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm just looking to see in the chat if there's anybody got another question here.
Martha,
yeah, okay, Michael.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you, Martha. I appreciate that. That was a very nice presentation. You know, I don't know if I necessarily have a question. It's more like I'm listening to you and I'm thinking out loud and I'm wondering if, you know, where this fear comes from. Because is it that you feel that politicians are, you know, are exaggerating, or they're just simply telling the truth, and then the truth becomes a point of perception for people? Either they're afraid or they think it's nonsense and they don't want to believe, because that's a lot of what we go through here in the United States. We have a really divided country at the moment because there are people that don't believe anything, and then there's people that believe everything, and you know, it just, so I don't know if there's a question there. I guess maybe I'm just asking for your opinion on what you think, where you think this is all coming from, because I'm all for the truth, and sometimes the truth is difficult to hear.
Yes. I also wanted to put in the presentation the diagram of the inverted U, which is very important. I don't know if I can answer to your question. The diagram is about the levels of fear, which shows that when fear is more, it's like a U inverted. So when fear is more, you can't believe what they're saying. So there is a top point at this fear. If there is and so much fear, you don't believe what they're saying. So I don't know if I did wrong that I didn't put this diagram in the presentation.
I think you did a very good presentation, Martha. I think we're just asking you further questions, and I think yours and Manos's research is very interesting indeed. Of course, it undermines it somewhat when the Prime Minister is partying and making his statements. The fear factor has largely gone out of the window, and as Michael said, the people in the UK are somewhat dubious now about the fear statements, given that the Prime Minister themselves was busy not complying with them. So I think we'll move on to the next presentation. So thank you so much. Very an excellent piece of research, very interesting. Yes, thank you very much. And next we have Ioannis Chatsionidis, apologies if I said that wrong, from the Department of Psychology and City Unity College. Very nice to see you, Ioannis. Actually, we've just linked. My college has just linked with your college, so this is even more interesting
very good
for me.
Very nice to see you too.
Yes.
And I'm very glad being here today.
Good.
In front of such an audience.
We're very pleased to welcome you, and you're going to talk on political attitudes, universal human values, and their relationships with the attitudes and behavioral conformity to the COVID-19 mitigation measures and medical protocols. Again,
exactly,
another very interesting. So do you want to upload your slides now?
Of course.
Ioannis?
Is this okay? Can you see it?
Yes. Can you make it full screen?
Yes. Is this all right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So let's begin. I am Ioannis Chatsionidis, and here we present you with Alexandra Valavani with our research on political attitudes, universal human values, and their relationships with the attitudes and behavioral compliance with COVID-19 mitigation measures and medical protocols. Let's begin. Introduction, political attitudes, political orientation, as well as the active participation in political parties have all been shown to have implications for people's cognition and behavior. Rigorous research and experimental studies, mainly coming from the US, have focused on the impact political attitudes and personal core values have on people's tendency to behaviorally conform to public health policies and protocols related to COVID-19. These cognitive structures, political attitudes, core values, may function as easily accessible and familiar information, leading to fast assumptions concerning complex stimuli or knowledge. According to data coming from a study held in the US, of all the participants, conservative Republicans reported a lower tendency to comply with sanitary protocols, example given wearing a mask, compared to liberal Democrats. 49% of Republicans and 83% of Democrats surveyed complied with sanitary protocols. To examine the relationships of specific dimensions of political attitudes when it comes to objectives and universal values with the attitudes and behavioral compliance related to COVID-19, political measures and sanitary protocols. To try and decode the social reality in Greece concerning how people respond to universal range crisis, in this case, the pandemic. And our third objective was to investigate the effects political beliefs and values may have on people's willingness to accept preventive and protective protocols. Example given, regular hand washing, proper mask use, avoid crowded spaces towards SARS-CoV-2. Sorry. Our hypothesis, we had three main hypotheses here in our research. The first hypothesis had to do with participants who consider contemporary politics to be a functional solution to general socioeconomic issues and participate in politics. Will experience higher agreement and compliance with sanitary protocols and restrictive measures as an expression of trust in political institutions. The second hypothesis had to do with identification with the right through political self-placement and political values will negatively affect agreement and compliance with sanitary protocols, although it will predict a higher degree of practical compliance with political restrictions. And the third hypothesis had to do with values of self-transcendence and conservatism, and their ability to predict higher agreement and compliance with sanitary protocols and restrictive measures. Let's move on to design a sample. To conduct the present study, a quantitative quasi-experimental research design was executed. Self-report questionnaires were formed and distributed mainly to social media platforms and emails for the data collection process. There was not any intervention or control group. Study participants answered the questions remotely. After the data collection process was completed, data analysis using the statistical program SPSS took place. Sample size was equal to 93 in total. 29% of the participants were males, i.e. 27 males, and 71% of the participants were females, i.e. 66 females. Initial sample size was equal to 129, but because this research was oriented in young to middle-aged adults, ages ranging from 18 to 50 years, currently working individuals living in Greek cities, 36 of them were excluded from the study because they did not meet the current criteria. Let's move on to the tools we used and the variables. When it comes to political participation, participants were asked to answer with a yes or no to the following questions. Do you think that modern politics offers functional solutions to general social and economic issues? Did you vote in the elections held in July 2019? Political self-placement. One self-placement item on the left-right scale was presented to the participants, and they were asked to answer with 1 representing the left and 10 representing the right. When it comes to political values, 4 items were used, focused on issues of inequality and exploitation, according to Evans et al. 1996. Cronbach's alpha was 0.815. Example given, government should redistribute income from the better off to those who are less well off. Participants had to answer on scales from 1, totally agree, to 5, totally disagree. Answers closest to 5 indicated right tendencies, according to Evans et al. self-enhancement versus self-transcendence, conservatism versus openness to change. Those are the values measured in this current study, and they are two-dimensional. Self-enhancement versus self-transcendence, conservatism versus openness to change. So to measure universal human values, Portrait Values Questionnaire 21 was utilized. This consisted of 21 items depicting 10 different values of a hypothetical person. Participants had to answer those items, phrases, rating them from 1, no similarity with me, to 6, almost like me. According to Schwartz's 1992 initial model, 10 values are presented: self-direction, stimulation, hedonism, achievement, power, security, tradition, conformity, benevolence, and universality. To measure the attitudes towards political measures and sanitary protocols, a questionnaire consisting of 17 items was created for the purpose of the study. The dimensions were 3: attitudes towards the restrictive measures, 7 items, with Cronbach's alpha being 0.905. Example given, the closure of non-essential businesses was a necessary condition during the pandemic. The second dimension had to do with attitudes towards the sanitary protocols, 6 items, Cronbach's alpha being 0.868. Example given, the mandatory 14-day quarantine for carriers of the virus is a necessary measure. And the third dimension of the attitudes had to do attitudes towards the authoritarian practices of the government. 4 items, Cronbach's alpha being 0.856. Example given, the fine for violators of the measures taken during the pandemic was necessary. Participants had to answer on scales from 1, totally agree, to 5, representing totally disagree. And at last, to measure compliance and the degree to which people practically complied with political measures and sanitary protocols, a questionnaire consisting of 8 items was formed for the purpose of the study. There were 2 dimensions of compliance. The first dimension had to do with restrictive political measures, compliance with restrictive political measures. There were 4 items, with Cronbach's alpha being 0.826. Example given, I did not move outside my prefecture or municipality when this was prohibited. And the second dimension had to do with compliance with sanitary protocols. 4 items also, Cronbach's alpha being 0.807. Example given, I followed the recommendations of the experts for washing hands, observance of hygiene rules, and wearing a mask. Participants were asked to answer on scales from 1, I did never apply it, to 5, I always applied it. So let's move on to our results. Results of the independent samples t-tests showed that participants who considered contemporary politics to be a functional solution to general socioeconomic issues tended to disagree less with political restrictions, with a mean of 2.97, compared to those who did not consider modern politics to be effective, with mean being 3.47, P being equal to 0.055. Participants who considered contemporary politics to be a functional solution to general socioeconomic issues, as expected, tended to disagree less with the authoritarian practices, 3.47, compared to those who did not consider modern politics to be effective, with a mean being equal to 4.05 and P being less than 0.05. Also, participants who voted in 2019 elections in Greece tended to disagree less with authoritarian practices, mean being 3.67, compared to those who did not vote, mean being 4.29, P being less than 0.01. Additionally, participants who voted in 2019 elections complied with political restrictions to a higher degree, mean being 4.02, compared to those who did not give their votes to anybody, mean being 3.33. 36, p being less than 0.05. Furthermore, a series of simple linear regression analysis was executed in order to test whether political self-placement significantly predicted attitudes towards political measures and sanitary protocols, as well as compliance. It was found that political self-placement significantly predicted disagreement with sanitary protocols. Here I present you with the statistics, p being less than 0.05, and with disagreement with sanitary protocols. And people who identified themselves with the right tended to disagree more with the sanitary protocols. Vita being 0.11 and p being less than 0.05. We also conducted a series of multiple linear regression in order to test whether universal human values and political values significantly predicted attitudes towards political measures and sanitary protocols, as well as compliance, but no statistically significant result emerged. So let's move on to the conclusions. In accordance with prior research findings, political attitudes seem to play a dominant role in the present study when it comes to COVID-related attitudes and behavioral compliance with measures and protocols. This points to the fact that responses to a public health crisis are strongly connected to political beliefs and ideologies. Considering that those beliefs are familiar and easily accessible perceptual tools for some people, they may function as a means of quickly interpreting and making decisions when it comes to complex information. Political participation was also found to have implications for the agreement and compliance. In the most part, people who accepted contemporary politics to be functional and those who voted in 2019 elections demonstrated a higher degree of tolerance towards restrictive measures and authoritarian practices, probably as an expression of trust in political institutions. On the other hand, people who reported political abstention showed a lower degree of agreement with authoritarian practices and political restrictions. Thus, they also demonstrated a lower degree of self-reported compliance with political restrictions, which could be linked to a general distrust and aversion towards modern politics. This study examined the role political attitudes play in the agreement and compliance through the lens of political self-placement and political values. Political values measured in this research design had only to do with inequality and exploitation. Dimensions of authoritarianism, radicalism, and submission to authority and the implications for the attitudes and compliance towards political measures and sanitary protocols were not tested in this research design. Right-wing and left-wing authoritarianism are good examples of some testable and measurable variables that could be investigated in further studies related to the pandemic. And you could see Kempthorne and Terrici 2021 for this specifically. So to end the presentation, naive realism bias or confusing one's own worldview for objective facts could also account for part of the public discrepancy towards this public health issue. People tend to think they see reality while they actually think reality. Cognitive structures, example given political beliefs and attitudes, and past experiences seem to be principal components of social reality decoding, interpretation, and behavioral response. In this study, hypotheses regarding the predictive ability of specific human values were not supported by the results. Future research could further examine the potential mediating role of values using different tools of measurement and probably collecting data from diverse populations. See Chan 2021 for this one. And here I present you with the references. That's the end.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Very interesting presentation again. I think lots of things to contemplate there. Do we have anybody? I think Luis, you have your hand up. Do you want to come in and ask a question? Is that a hand? I can see a white thing that's No, it's not. Okay. Has anybody else? I can't see anything in the chat. Has anybody got a question for Ioannis from this interesting perspective on political values and compliance with political values? Do you think, given what you said about the pandemic has enhanced distrust in politicians? What's your view on that? Do you think
my view, sorry for interrupting you, my view on that is not exactly that the pandemic induced distrust and aversion towards politicians. My view on that is that people who had pre-existing beliefs of aversion or of distrust towards political institutions, or do not accept contemporary politics to be effective solution to general issues. Those people would be, for those people I was talking about mainly, and maybe, but this is only a hypothesis of mine, maybe the pandemic enhanced those negative attitudes and beliefs, or those neutral attitudes towards modern politics. It didn't cause aversion.
Okay, I think that's an important distinction. I think you're right to say that there is already some distrust of politicians for some in the population. It's different. I wonder if it's different again in other countries. So in the UK, for example, I think that what I witnessed anecdotally when I came to Athens in the summer was more compliance with restrictions than we had in the UK. So in the UK, when they said it's finished, everybody has stopped complying with all the medical requirements. People still use hand sanitizer, but mask wearing very much stopped immediately. And what I noticed in Athens was people still wearing masks. So it was an interesting difference that obviously the health requirements were still something that were in people's minds. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very regional sometimes.
Yeah.
Here in the United States as well. In New York City, you still see many people wearing masks, but if you travel outside of New York, I was in Texas over the summer and Louisiana. COVID doesn't exist over there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Ioannis, that was a very good presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank
and you
you.
have an excellent voice, by the way. You should definitely use that voice because I think you have very good talent there.
Maybe, yes.
It's the 300th time I hear about this. Thank you very much.
You have a very good diction.
There.
Your pronunciation of English is very good. So congratulations on that. So thank you, Ioannis. Has anybody got any further questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask more regarding John's presentation. I would like to ask your opinion, Ian, Jean, and Michael. From your experience, we saw the presentation from Martha before. Do you think that there is a difference between let's say, ideological characteristics, or even more, the individual versus collective rights as a tradition, as a philosophical tradition between the UK and USA and Europe? I mean, we know that in the United Kingdom and the United States, it's more the individual rights, you know, it's my right, I can do whatever I want, so I need no law. The state cannot somehow force me to do something I don't agree with. While in the European Union, mostly, you know, the law has is a mystic figure all around Europe. So this is the law, we have to obey the law, it is what it is. Even though there was, as John suggested, no connection, no relation between distrust and the pandemic, as the pandemic being the starting point. In your experience, is there any difference between the cultural ideology or essence of ideology between the individual and the collective and the social?
That's a very interesting question, I think, Manos. In my view, because some of my research draws on cultural values, and it's interesting, Ioannis, that you referred to Schwartz's values there. I certainly think that there are regional, as Michael said, and country values that we might use. So, for example, Mediterranean cultures might be viewed as in Edward Hall's perspective, high context cultures, where there is a consensual approach, much more consensual approach to government than perhaps low context cultures like the United States and the UK. Although what Michael said about because the southern United States has a much more collectivist perhaps culture than the northern United States, where you might see more individualism. So that's a kind of Texas, though, I think is renowned for their views, their strong individualistic views. But I was talking more about the very southern United States. I think there is certainly something to be explored there. I don't know if Ioannis has thought about this, but I think the dominant cultural values and norms of a particular society are going to influence the way in which they react to politicians. Although I say that hesitantly because, as we can see from recent events in the UK, the UK is it's a peculiar mixed bag. And it's interesting that people don't understand. So, reflecting, I was speaking to an Italian colleague, and when the Queen was dying, I said, oh no, this is going to be big, this is going to be madness. And there we see a very individualistic culture completely gone sideways, if you like, in terms of their political views. That we see very strongly the monarchy is a dominant value for the whole nation, which was quite interesting, I thought. It's not shifted, and it doesn't shift even with the individualistic characteristics of English people or British people. But I'm probably the worst person to ask, actually. That was a very long-winded answer because I'm Irish descent, so I have a tendency to the rebellious anyway, and the distrustful of politicians. So I'm probably not the best person to ask.
I think that we're experiencing a lot of, and I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but I think what we're experiencing a lot of here in the United States is really a social and cultural dynamic that sort of penetrates every aspect of what we do here, because there's cultural divide. There's the divide based on discrimination here in this country. There's a big political divide. And then on top of that, you have other issues like migrant issues that we're experiencing here in the United States, where we open our doors. But the thing is that parts of the United States open their doors, whereas other parts of the United States close their doors toward migrants. So it's a very dynamic situation at the moment, and views, especially on pandemic, are totally divided here.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I was actually, and this is a kind of interesting, and you sort of touched on that, the compliance with the medical requirements of COVID. I was actually fascinated by the way in which across the world, societies were prepared to be locked down. I found that quite fascinating. Human beings, if there is, in my view, human beings, if there is a danger, naturally are risk adverse. They will not put themselves in a situation of danger. So for governments to mandate that everybody should be essentially locked down was quite interesting in the way in which the compliance actually happened. It was an interesting phenomenon. So I think the last two presentations are quite important, and I think there's more significance that needs to be explored, because it seems to me in democratic societies, the way in which the compliance actually happened was quite shocking, I think. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do think that we're still thinking about and contemplating. And as you say, Michael, it's quite divided. And there are cultural divides along that, as well as the sort of the political and the social. So I think, thank you, Anis. I think you've started a conversation which is very interesting, and I think probably there is a lot there to explore further. So thank you for that. Shall we move forward to the next presentation?
Yes.
I'm wary of the time. Margarita's looking
I
nervous.
would be obliged to chair the cheerleader.
Yeah. So we have Evanthea Malinaki of the School of Journalism and Mass Media at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and Anthonis Gardiakouthiotis, Associate Professor of School of Journalism and Mass Media at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, exploring the role of emotions in online health information seeking behavior, their relationship with gender, e-health literacy, and health disparities. So Evanthea, do you want to put that?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Eva. It's
Eva.
Easier.
Okay, it's easier, yes.
Easier. So you can call me Eva. Evanthea is my full name. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a very interesting conference with many interesting presentations and research proposals. Once again, thank you so much. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, you need to click full screen though.
Yeah, Eva. I know, it stacks a bit. So good morning once again. As you said, the title of my presentation is Exploring the Role of Emotions in Online Health Information Seeking Behavior, the relationship with gender, e-health literacy, and health disparities. So what we know over the last few years, health disparities have gained significant attention within the area of public health research. Many attempts have been noticed aiming at determining and confronting these disparities worldwide. Health disparities negatively affect the health of deprived groups of people and can cause by socioeconomic disparities, and also other types of disparities. For example, we do have minority disparities or disparities that derive from sexual orientation. But in this study, we chose to focus on socioeconomic disparities. Health disparities are related with limited health literacy, one's ability to obtain, process, and understand basic health information needed to make appropriate health decisions derived from various sources, like the doctor, the media, or the family environment. The increase of health information available online has changed the landscape of health information. We know that online health information seeking is a common activity for internet users, and the affective component, emotions, is the key yet to understand part of this process. One's limited resources, for example, financial, social, or technological, may lead to socioeconomic health disparities as people somehow are excluded from health information. The internet era counterpart to health literacy is e-health literacy, and according to recent literature, the relationship between health literacy and health disparities still remains unclear. So As for the objectives of this study, we aimed to explore the relationship between emotions like fear, terror, satisfaction, and complacent after online search for health information and health decision making, as well as health disparities and e-health literacy. In this study, we also examined gender differences in online health information seeking behavior because many studies stated that, women are more active internet seekers of health information.
Ava,
Okay,
your slides
methods.
are not moving forward, so you need to click down the list if you can't share the full screen.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. In which slide? Objectives. Which one you didn't see?
That's the first time they've all moved forward. So if you just move forward from here, that's great.
Okay. Okay. As for the methodology that we used, a convenience sample of 2,699 individuals aged 17 to 84 years old voluntarily participated in an online survey that took place from July 2020 to September 2020. All participants resided in Greece and were recruited through the internet with a snowball sampling. Okay, as for participants' sociodemographics, most of the participants, 39.5%, have completed secondary education, and many of them have had completed higher education, 26.8%, and or had a postgraduate or a PhD degree, 30.7%. However, the 33.9% did not have individual income, either because they were unemployed, 25.4%, or they were university students, 24.5%. The 22.5% as well occasionally said that they felt disparity, which it was defined as any lack of equity in the socioeconomic field. Also, the 99% said that they went online daily, where the 34.6% used the internet to search for health information 1 to 2 times every month. So here we can see that the percentage drops down a bit when it comes to online health information seeking behavior. They probably choose other information sources like the doctor or people who have already suffered from the same health problem, or their social environment, family and friends, or the media, traditional media. Okay, results. Preliminary analysis showed that positive emotions after online search for health information was positively related with changing decisions, promoting self-efficacy, and consulting others. On the other hand, negative emotions after online search for health information were negatively related with e-health literacy and positively related with perceived disparity. Internet use frequency as well for health information was positively associated with health literacy skills related with understanding health information from the media and e-health literacy. health literacy related to the media was also positively correlated with e-health literacy, and e-health literacy was also found to be positively correlated with health literacy skills related with understanding health information from the doctor. So here we can see two different dimensions of health literacy skills. The first one, it has to do with understanding health-related information from the media, whereas the second dimension, it has to do with understanding health information which is related or comes from the doctor, one's doctor. Next, hierarchical regression analysis that followed showed that gender was also related to negative emotions in the first and the second step, and positive emotions in both the first and the second step. Regarding health literacy skills related to the media in the first step and the second step, gender, education, income, and internet use frequency for health information were also related to health literacy media. Concerning health literacy doctor, in the first step, gender and education were related to health literacy doctor, and in the second step, gender, education, and health disparities were related to health literacy doctor. As for e-health literacy, in the first step and in the second step, education, income, internet use frequency, and internet use frequency for health information were related to e-health literacy. All steps, we need to point out, significantly added to the overall prediction model. Conclusions. The more participants experienced positive emotions after online search for health information, the more willing they were to use the information gathered. So it is important to point out here that it's not only doing the first step, which is to having access and gather online health information, but also if the person is willing to apply health information in order to improve his life and well-being. Also, men that experience more positive emotions in contrast with women who experience more negative after online search for health information, they were more willing to use the collected information. The more participants used the internet in general, the better e-health literacy they had. Okay, that's normal. The more participants used the internet for health information, the better health literacy media and e-health literacy skills they had. Okay, we also found positive correlations between the different dimensions of health literacy and e-health literacy. Women also are found to have better health literacy skills. And the more educated participants were, and the more income they earned, the better health literacy and digital health literacy skills they had. Okay, discussion results are discussed in terms of improving the levels of health literacy and e-health literacy. So to help people overcome health disparities and achieve health equity. Consistent with previous studies, we confirmed that women tend to have higher levels of health literacy than men. So gender seems to affect health literacy along with other sociodemographics like education and income. but further studies are needed to clarify more of these relationships. What is more, internet use is found to affect the levels of health literacy and e-health literacy. Improving one's e-health literacy is crucial and helps people to take current and informed health decisions, so to improve their health and well-being. On the contrary, insufficient health literacy is associated with a low socioeconomic position and poor health status. In our study, we also find that higher socioeconomic status is related with better health literacy skills. But as a closing point, I have to say that future studies are needed to investigate further the relationship between emotions after online health information seeking behavior, gender, health disparities, and health literacy. These are my references, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Eva, for that. Another excellent presentation and very informative as well. I'm going to ask for very quick, yes, very well done. I'm going to ask for very quick questions because we have one more presentation to come. Anybody got any questions?
Can I ask something?
Yes, Margarita.
So congratulations, first of all, Evanthea. I prefer Evanthea.
Thank you very much
for the research. What I see in your results is that the more participants use internet, the better e-health literacy they had. And I was wondering if somehow your research had also a bit of research about fake news and health information, because this is a very important thing to research on. The health information has caused a lot of suffering around the world, and fake news and health information. Have you thought about it to do something on this? Because we can say that internet is a good tool, but how we use it.
Thank you so much for your question. Okay. Yeah. That's an interesting aspect, including the research around fake news, because we already know that many people turn to the internet so to get informed about health issues, and especially about the pandemic. In this study, we didn't include fake news. Our goal was mostly to investigate how people behave when they go online in order to search for health information. Also investigate their profile, their socioeconomic status, if there are any gender differences. What about if education and income play some role, and what kind of emotions online search of for health information they create. People are feeling happy or terrified and scared after going online in order to search for some health information, in order to give an answer to some symptoms they probably face, or another health problem that they probably have.
So maybe in a future research, because misinformation,
yes, absolutely,
cause big problems, and so
yes,
internet would not make the life of the people that search online and find fake news and misinformation better, but worse.
Yeah, we have this in mind because, you know, now with COVID and everything, fake news is everywhere. So we need to conduct some research around this topic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Margarita, and thank you, Eva. I think that that's as an important way to take forward your research. I think that the pandemic has shown this topic of fake news needs to be added to the way your project is developing. So thank you for that. Excellent presentation again. Shall we move to the next presentation, the last presentation for this particular group? Yes, thank you very much, Eva. And can I invite Cosmas Koteas from the psychology department at City Unity College, as well as Emmanuel Takis from Laboratory of Social Media, School of Journalism and Mass Communications, to talk on psycholization as a destructive choice, the paradigm of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Very topical indeed. So Cosmas, would you like to load up your slides? I presume it's you that's talking. Eva, could you take down your slides?
Yes,
and then
I'm so sorry, but it's stuck. So 1 minute, please.
Cosmas, have you tried to
upload? Yeah.
No, now we cannot listen to you, Cosmas.
Cosmas, I think you're on mute because I can't hear you.
Yes, you are muted, Cosmas.
You're still muted. Can't hear you.
I cannot hear you.
Have you checked the microphone settings on your computer?
I'm trying, but we
can hear you.
Right. Perfect.
You can hear you.
Okay. That's great. Is that
yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're talking about do you want me to make it full screen? Is that
if you would, please,
as you like.
All right. Let me try that. No, I will fail completely on that task.
Okay, so, don't worry. You can go through. It works. Yeah.
So our topic is psychologization as a deconstructive choice, the paradigm of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Dr. Takas and I, we did a content analysis for the issue in hand. Just a second, please forgive me. All right. Firstly, let me give a very basic idea of the term psychologization, which stems from the socio-psychological tradition and describes the mechanism of attributing the content of a message or the behavior of a social actor to personal motives, as well as of reducing the message or the behavior to its subjectivity, thus deliberately ignoring political, social, or economic variables. As a mechanism, psychologization is strongly related to attribution theory by attributing responsibility to stable, internal, and controllable factors of a social actor for a specific behavior or choice, a process that is a result of the fundamental attribution error. Now, in this research, the main aim is to explore to what extent the selected media use psychologization techniques to politically construct the current image of Vladimir Putin. Therefore, content analysis has been employed, and the findings, at least one of the main of this research, is that the selected media have strongly used psychologization to construct the image of an unstable, delusional, aggressive Vladimir Putin, implying that the war between Russia and Ukraine is a result solely of his inherent characteristics, and thus ignoring political and historical occurrences, the inclusion of whose may provide a deeper understanding of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So Professor Stamos Papastamou gave the following definition for psychologization. By the term psychologization, we mean the establishment of a causal link between the social behavior or the ideological discourse and the psychological characteristics of the person or persons who express it. Now, a very basic inside understanding of psychologization includes that implicit theories of personality actively participate in the production of the everyday psychologization of behavior by postulating instinctively and unscientifically the existence of correlations between individual personality traits and externalizing behavior. Through the biased view, the amateur psychologist can, with a single psychological characterization attributed to a specific person, draw the overall person-centered profile with which, according to his impression, the behavior of the person in question is most adequately interpreted. However, this approach deprives the necessary space and interest from the control and interpretation of both the individual conditions and the circumstances, even if they are part of the causal basis of the interpreted behavior. Now, as a consequence, always according to the theories in discussion, the interpreted behavior will be manifest similarly and continuously in every context and circumstance. Such an admission would constitute scientific legitimization of the oversimplification of the interpreted tools of psychologization. Correspondingly, in social phenomena, the analysis through the prism of psychoanalytical approaches that academic psychology often undertakes may lend prestige to psychologization, but it is characterized by a basic causal interpretation. Now, when we psychologizing the social, we attribute to every social behavior secondary, latent meaningful value, which needs to be identified, described, and revealed. This interpretation accepts that all social behavior emanates from the complex, multi-layered, and uncharted psyche of its agent, so overestimating the after psychological mechanisms that in fact they tend to investigate events and their causal basis outside the context of social interventions. So now personifying the state. Although states are abstract entities, often in order to understand their actions, both the mass public and their political representatives embody them. This incorporation, accordingly, is often personified, especially in cases where the state entity is most strongly associated with the strongest personality of the political system of the state in question. Personification is widespread as a way of recruiting and perceiving other countries by the average citizen, by political leaders, and even by the academic community. The relationship between personification and psychologization stands in line with this approach. Psychologization includes the claim that there are some inherent characteristics of collective identity that stem from inherent characteristics of the human psyche. This claim is based on a popular and widespread metaphorical connection between collective entities and individuals. On a psychological level, we find a reflection of this assumption in the impression that social categories, classes, for example, have specific personalities just like individuals. And on this, correspondingly, rests the habitual attribution in political rhetoric of specific and unique characteristics to collectives. Furthermore, dynamic politics, a sense of moral superiority, as well as fear and distrust of outgroups, are characteristic attitudes and processes that emerge from the need to maintain and favor the in-group and can lead to hostility and conflict between groups, even in the absence of a true or realistic struggle for raw materials or power. When trust is based on the in-group, it is easier to fear the hatred perceived by its members from the out-group. Now, fear of the out-group practically means cohesion of the in-group. Perceived fear of the out-group increases the loyalty and cohesion of the in-group, while at the same time, the appeal to defend the interest of the in-group has a higher degree of legitimacy than the defense of the same interest of its members separately. In the context of the above assumptions, and given that the research of the psychologization of the actions, the behavior, if I may, of a state, as reflected above in the face of dominant political leaders, simultaneously functions as a mechanism to strengthen the identity of the conflicted parties. In that sense, parties are not actually in the warfare party, but in the broader cultural East, West, etc. Parties, with the formation of group may seek a wide field of research of the multi-level phenomena in the recently opened military conflict between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Ukraine. Now, the aim of this study is under no circumstances explicitly not attempts to examine the political, economic, military, or geostrategic content of or legitimacy of the Ukrainian war. Accordingly, it does not examine the correctness, accuracy, honesty, or objectivity of the arguments and causal appeals of any of the direct or indirect participants. The core research target of the study is to examine the use of psychologizing mechanisms, especially from the press, including both printed newspapers and news sites, of third, meaning to the military conflict countries, third countries, as well as the intended results of this practice, always in the interpretive light of the tools provided by the social psychology field. The psychologizing interpretation of a leader, and especially as a reflection and personification of a state, utilizes mechanisms, the investigation of which can potentially lead to re-evaluation of the interpretation of causal events, but also of the process of assessing the factors of group formation within a suprastate framework, the characteristics of which seem to be co-shaped evolutionarily also by the competence of the application of the mechanisms of psychologization. The imprint of these mechanisms can be found as a trace in the choice of terms and characterizations used by the press for its voluntary or involuntary synergy in this result. Now, there is a political question. What remains to be examined is whether the systematic use of psychological interpretations in social influence phenomena is part of the context of wider intended results, or is an oversimplification but explicit function of commentary and information. Forgive me. Now, the method. Okay, we use the following methods. Our research examines systematically through content analysis, the content of one Greek and one US newspaper for a period of 2 months before the initiation of the military conflict in Ukraine and 2 months after it. The choice of the time period of the research is intended to record the intensity of the phenomenon and its escalation in accordance with the different stages of the warfare. The selection of the specific newspapers is based on their social influence as a function of their ranking based on newspaper sales, as well as their website traffic and the historical prestige they carry in terms of their reliability, their writing, and their general social gravitas. The examination is based on the finding of words, phrases, and terms included in or promoting the phenomenon of psychologization, through which the description and above all the causal basis of behavior attributed to Vladimir Putin is attempted. Now, the first newspaper and representing for this research the US press very generally, the first is the New York Times. We examine it for methodological use of psychologization for the behavior of Vladimir Putin. And the New York Times is an American daily newspaper, generally considered as liberal and reliable. The New York Times has won 132 Pulitzer Prizes, and it's more than any other newspaper, and 3 Peabodys. So it's considered generally reliable. It is ranked the 18th in the world by circulation and 3rd in the US, and the New York Times articles are used in the present search that we use in the present search, I'm sure, are taken by the international edition and were originally examined in Greek. They were retranslated for the current presentation. Now, before we get...
Can I ask you to try
Yes.
to conclude, to have maybe time for questions if you have...
Well, it will take only a second, please. All right. New York Times are using... what's interesting is they're using different terms for the actions of the Russian Federation before the initiation of the war and after. And what they do is before the war, they're referring to Russian Federation, Moscow, Kremlin, and other such institutional characterizations. After the initiation of the war, they start referring directly and only to Vladimir Putin and his psychological situation. you will see underlined this example is indicative. Before the war, we have the Moscow and Russian president. We use the word president, and we are trying to government, etc. And you will see here after the invasion, which we go from president and Moscow to bad boy, to paranoid, to dictator syndrome, etc., etc. The second newspaper is a Greek newspaper called Protothema. It's a Sunday newspaper. It's the first. It has the most visited site from all the news sites that stand with a newspaper. And we have a slightly different way, in the sense that Protothema has a majority of its readers expressly or tacitly Russian and Putri friendly to their views. So what they do is they do rhetorical questions, or they put third person's ideas in quotes. For example, we have, is he crazy? And Britain's psychotherapist says he has psychotic symptoms, etc., etc. And please, you may ask all the questions you want if I can assist.
Thank you, Cosmos. Again, another extremely interesting presentation. I see you had a lot of slides, so I'm sorry you had to rush the last bit. We need 5 minutes
don't worry.
for questions.
It's indications of such already discussed, so don't worry.
So I'm going to open it to the floor. So thank you. Have we got questions from the floor for Cosmos? Yes, it's a very good presentation, Margarita. It's very interesting.
Oh, thank you.
It's Cosmas. Cosmos means the world.
Cosmas, sorry.
Don't worry.
Yeah, Cosmos
I almost had my degree
mean the
from the
world.
States as Cosmos. I completely understand, and I answer to Cosmos too. They actually wrote on my degree, I'm not joking, they wrote Cosmos Koteas.
There you go.
I'm pretty sure it's not my name, but it's all right. It's pretty close.
Oh, you did it right.
Cosmos, any questions for Cosmos?
It's a very dry topic.
Well, I think it's an important topic. I think that it's difficult to say because obviously I don't read Greek, so I can't comment on the Greek newspapers, but I think the media in the UK definitely draws on psychological tones, shall we say, in order to convince of the arguments and as well as the politicians. So I think it is a difficult topic, and I think there is a over-reliance on it's almost in some parts of the media a psychological warfare, it seems to me. It's a conviction that is based on little other than an opinion that's held in the belief of the editors and the journalists, which is concerning. So you know, I'll throw it out to everyone. What happened to news that is I mean, you can never have anything, in my view, that's not got a bias in it, because everybody has a bias, everybody has, but neutral reporting is a question that I think should be posed, and why is this psychological dynamic? I think it started. I think it's got worse during the pandemic. I think the pandemic has enhanced this tendency for I don't know what it's like in Greece, but there's a certain hysteria.
And I think that this as well has to do with fake news and misinformation.
Yeah. Misinformation, emotive language, which is obviously has psychological implications. It's very concerning, in my view.
Please note, though, that it's very hard for psychologization instruments to be characterized as fake news because they are sneaky enough not to be presented as news. They are not factual reports. They are opinions, or they're underlined. It seems that when we have an extreme division in a society, a personification of the evil presents itself. We had it from the 15th century and the fight between Protestants and Catholics to the World War II recently, and now apparently it's part of a very greater strategic plan, in the sense that Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation invaded Ukraine back in 2014, and we had none of these comments on the mental health and his psychological situation. And it's like 7 years ago. It's not that far that the political groups and supra-state organizations are not changed. So apparently this is an organized and of another level manufacturing of an evil. I'm not commenting on Vladimir Putin himself, just the instrument of psychologization. I'm pretty sure that if we read, which I did, Russian Times, you will be very impressed by the polar opposite presentation of every Western leader as half crazy, very problematic in terms of psychology and mental health. They do exactly the same. It's not about who, but
no, it's the language that is being used. But to some extent, there is an expectation that, well, particularly the Soviet Union would use language that was anti-Western in the media, because that is how they maintain their political position, by using psychological tactics in their media. But it seems to me that there is a worrying trend now in Western media. In order to win a political position, there is this emotive language that is being used that is actually far removed from neutral reporting, and yet we still see around the world, and this is the problem. Why pick on this particular, as you say, okay, the Crimea was objected to, but there was not the same media coverage in the same way. The hyping up of the language is quite severe, and yet we see the occupation still by the British government of Ireland. We see the occupation of Cyprus by the Turkish government, and yet there is no equal comment on, you know, those are not the only areas of the world, but it is quite, it's a startling difference, if you like, in the language that's being used. So I would say it's problematic, and it poses then a question against some of the democratic principles that are kind of being challenged by the use of such language. That would be my observation. I'm very wary that we have come, and it's a fascinating topic. I'd like to talk more. I'm aware that we've come to 12:30 and it's time for a break, and perhaps a bit of lunch or tea break or whatever. Probably lunch if you're in Greece.
Break now, so yeah. It will be short.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for another very, very interesting session. Thank you to all the presenters. Fantastic job, and I look forward to seeing you later.
Okay. See you in a while.
Thank you.
So we are here again with the fourth panel, teaching languages. And the panel leader is Sally Lyons, Assistant Professor, Organization Management from Canada. So we have 2 presentations, and Sally, you can present.
Thank you so much, and greetings from Canada. I'm pleased to be with you all this morning. This morning here anyway. We have 2 very exciting presentations here during this segment, And I'd like to welcome first, and I apologize if I don't pronounce names correctly, Tugba Seven and let me see now, and Miriam Romero, who are going to be who's going to be introducing us to the topic, Transmitting Knowledge Remotely, the Case of Language Courses. I'm going to turn it over to you, ladies.
Thank you.
So now Mike has some company because he's here from very early. What time there, Tugba?
It's 4:40 a.m. Good morning. And Miriam is she's luckier than me. It's 5:40 at her state. So thank you very much. Today's presentation is Transmitting Knowledge Remotely, the Case of the Language Courses. And I'm Tugba Seven. I'm Associate Professor and World Languages Coordinator at Southwestern Oklahoma State University.
Hi, everybody. My name is Miriam Romero. I am Assistant Professor at Norwich University. The presentation outline we will follow is to present the purpose of this presentation. Also, we are going to discuss briefly the introductions. In the introduction, the benefits and importance of learning foreign languages, and also the benefits of teaching online teaching. We are going to provide some background information about our campuses, the methodologies and examples that we use, and obviously the conclusion for our presentation.
So as a Czech proverb states, you live a new life for every new language you speak. If you know only one language, you live only once. In order to give the students the opportunity to live different lives by teaching them foreign languages, college professors work hard to provide the best teaching instructions in their language courses. As of today, most of the presentations and research has been done about language teaching methodologies in a brick and mortar classroom setting. However, there is still so much to share about the communication in the online world languages courses. We are two professors who work in two different states in America. Dr. Romero in Vermont, and I work in Oklahoma. And in this presentation, we would like to focus on best practices that we applied and worked in our online world languages courses. We want to show that unique and effective teaching approaches that we applied in our courses increase the communication in an online world language courses and somehow worked better for the students compared to those in a brick and mortar classroom. So as we begin our presentation, I would like to remind you again the importance of learning foreign languages and how the languages improve our lives. There is a big list of benefits of learning languages, but we would like to mention in our presentation few of these. For example, the study of foreign languages improves the speaker confidence, traveling becomes more enjoyable, fun and easy, enhances memory, therefore it's a long tool for longevity. So over the past decades, the world has become more technological, and these technologies have allowed us to work in close contact with people all over the world in the comfort of our personal space, like we are doing right now. So I would like to mention some benefits of learning languages in online courses. Teaching languages through distance learning has been used for more than 15 years, but became very popular with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic that affected our world. Language learning has transformed with the use of different technological tools. Thanks to the online courses, students can take the language courses at any location that they are living. There are two types of online instructions, synchronous and asynchronous. In the synchronous courses, students meet with the professor through a video application like Zoom at a specific time and day. In the course, students see the professor and other classmates can ask questions during the lecture and have interactions with the classmates in the breakout rooms. In the asynchronous courses, students work on their free time to complete the required coursework, follow the guidelines and assistance of the professor, and study the material at their own pace and style, and contact the professor if they have questions about the grammar and vocabulary. In the course, several teaching tools are introduced to increase the active learning and interaction. In both asynchronous and synchronous courses, the professor have a big responsibility to design the course in a very efficient way so all the students can find what they are looking for.
When schools were closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we as teachers had to improvise and change our teaching styles. One of the several challenges we faced as a language educators was to maintain students being actively involved in the process of communication and in the process of learning. We, Dr. Sabine and I, teach at different schools. I am in the northeastern part of the country, and she teaches at the southwestern. So furthermore, the demographics on our campuses are very different. However, students' needs are pretty similar, if not the same. We both follow the actual standards of proficiency and aim to use the communicative approach in our classes. Therefore, we share the same paradigm. How are we going to adapt our classes without making students feel overwhelmed or isolated, without making big changes to our curriculum? So some information background about my school. As I mentioned previously, I am in the North England part of the country. So my university is a small college, liberal arts university, where 60% of the students' populations are of the cadet. That means they are part of the military, and 40% more or less are civilians. So the students' population demographics are also students come from low or mid-low income classes. That means most of the students are on any type of scholarship. And also, especially the students that are on the part of the Corps of Cadets, they have a very rigid schedule. They wake up very early in the morning and they have to fulfill their military requirement and activities, and then take classes and continue with the classes as well. So I was assigned to teach the first ever 100% online class for the COVID pandemic. So it was a big challenge for me personally. So I decided to use the hybrid learning. We usually have 15 students in our classes, more or less. But one of the challenges that we face, besides all of the ones that were mentioned, is most of my students were freshmen. So they're still in their high school mind. So it was a very difficult school year for everybody, I bet.
Yeah, and I work in a rather small rural public university in the state of Oklahoma. My university has more than 5,000 students, of which 70% predominantly consist of white students. The 50% of the all student population is first generation college students. Most of the students work full-time jobs and pursue their college degree at the same time. And they come from a mid and low income families. So these are called non-traditional students. So 8 years ago, I was hired to teach Spanish courses and to implement new courses in Italian. So the university back then had only one online language course available for students, in Spanish for students. This course was not required for the students, for most of the students, therefore was not very popular among the students. As I mentioned before, most of the students work and need to commute from long distances to attend their courses. The nearest city to our campus town is about 100 kilometers away. So the geographical location and the student demographic of the university led me to think about reaching out to more students and teaching them languages and cultures through online language courses. After several challenges and many workshops, I was able to implement and teach my first asynchronous Spanish course 8 years ago. Fortunately, my first online Spanish class was received highly positively by the students. Students greatly appreciated the flexibility that comes with being in an online environment. In total, I designed, implemented, and taught a total of 8 distance language learning languages courses in Spanish and Italian. Thanks to the increased interest by the students, I could also establish a fully online world languages program, which we call it minor. It's about like with 5-6 language courses total.
Well, as Professor Sevin mentioned, after several professional online trainings, also we read books, articles. We had also one-on-one conferences with colleagues. We did lots of trial and error. So we tried the pacing of the classes. We were committed to set up the tone of the class from the beginning of the semester. We did constantly check-ins in different ways. Also, we surveyed the students to see how they were going and also asking anonymously for the classes. But the clue for us was consistency. We provide weekly schedule. We have also grading schedules. And so everything had like a routine for the students, and these hundreds of hours in front of the computer definitely worked for us. One of the methodologies that I use, I'm going to talk about it, is Hurst mentions that we all professors should adapt and adhere the keys. Keep it short and simple. Meanwhile, Professor Batts mentions that chunking means dividing the semester in small chunks to avoid students feeling overwhelmed. And that's what I did. I decided to use the chunking method. And online teaching was the only option during COVID, as we all know, but it's the least ideal environment for successful teaching and learning. The dichotomy between synchronous and asynchronous meetings was a real struggle for us. I had to keep in mind flexibility, convenience, and the learning process. I adapted both synchronous and asynchronous forms combined and properly structured to help students to familiarize themselves with assignments. I also recorded video tutorials and simplified my syllabus into one page to establish an effective learning environment. So hopefully you can see the syllabus that I created. It's just basic information with classroom meetings, goals and expectations for the students. Not all the information that we usually have in a syllabus, but it's used for students to focus on one thing. And also, my goal was to develop an online community, avoiding making students feel isolated, and that worked when I established a clear routine. My routine was very simple, but at least I work from my perspective. In day one, we met online, so we had synchronous classes, and the routine was the same. Warm up, an introduction to the topic, 5 minutes, and then I did a guided practice, and then individual practice, an oral assessment every class, and at the end, I closed with a wrap up. The second day was a synchronous class. That was the opportunity for the students to practice beyond the class, practice beyond the textbook. I had lots of resources in our system. They work on the homework, they had quizzes, and also I include listening and reading and comprehension activities. So that was the format that I used. Also, I use oral assessment, proctor exams, and oral check-ins. Every other week, I met one-on-one with students and just to check on them and ask, was the opportunity to connect with them. The synchronized classes provide a sense of presence that helps to generate a learning community. And the synchronized classes provide the students the opportunity to practice beyond the classroom. The check-ins every other week was used to check for the students and connect with them in a more personal way.
So in all my asynchronous courses had something in common. Language learning was and is always mixed with the cultural exposure. Students learned grammar, vocabulary, and improved their communicative skills while discovering Italian and Hispanic culture with the help of several applications. The course syllabus, as Dr. Romero mentioned, are very simple, very easy to understand, no useless information were included. And I sent weekly reminder emails and announcements to students so they knew that I was always there to guide and assist them. In the courses, a variety of assignments were introduced. I created all and implemented all materials of the course, such as syllabus, assignments, tests, rubric, etc. The course is the exact reflection of the real world. This is very important for me. And in my courses, there isn't any memorization, but there is always learning through repetition and practice because students retain better the language. So the courses consist of discussions about cultural topics, as I mentioned, assignments in the target language, speaking activities in groups, interactive activities, and all these are guided assignments provided by me, so students have interactions to follow. So at my university, the reward was increased interest in the topic and languages, increased attendance and participation, interaction in the courses, increased enrollment in other language courses, and in the world languages program.
And in my campus I increased attendance 10 to 100% of the students were in class. Barely students missed a class. Also, classroom participation was 100%. Every student wanted to participate and be involved in the learning process. The class average was 78. I think under the circumstances that we were under teaching for COVID, so I think it was a very good class average. And most importantly, the students were really ready to succeed in the next level. They were confident with their skills.
So Dr. Romero and I received great student feedback, and these comments showed that we were on the right track. These are only the tip of the iceberg that you can see, because we received many great feedback. So thank you very much for your attention. We are ready for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know all of us who have been in academia in the last couple of years have experienced the switch to online, whether we wanted to or not. So I appreciated your presentation. So we're going to go to questions, and I see Margarita, would you like to lead us off?
Yes, thank you, Diosteli. Thank you, Tugba, and thank you, Miriam. This was a great presentation, and we have learned a lot. It's actually a comment, not really a question, because yesterday we were also discussing about the impacts of COVID and what has done in our lives. So we find the positive thing that we educators learned to listen to our students. And this is what has caused the great interaction and the positive reaction of some students, that there are a part of them that actually loves to work online and interact with other students and with the academics. And this is a great thing to know that the new normal is actually something that we needed to learn to listen to our colleagues, our students, and learn again to interact, to communicate, to engage, and become better.
I agree totally with you. Even though we are teaching online courses, we are more connected with our students than face-to-face courses, in my opinion. And Dr. Romero and I, we have different situations, because she began teaching online courses with the beginning of the pandemic, but I began with 100% asynchronous courses 8 years ago. So it was a big challenge for me as a professor who worked at a rural public university in the middle of southwestern Oklahoma. So we both had different challenges I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for your insight, Margarita.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Margarita as well. And with Tugba, we had different challenges, but I think that we were able to overcome those challenges in a positive way. And yes, we are more connected with the students that we previously did before pandemic. No, it changed, but it's looking like a good normal.
Michael, would you like to ask a question?
Hi there. Thank you. That was a very interesting presentation. And, you know, when I was listening, I just kept hearing adaptability, and I like the way that we all, and I think that we all have adapted in some form or another. And I also teach asynchronously, and, you know, I think I've been doing it for several years, and I think the biggest issue is always, you know, how do we emotionally connect to our students, right? And Tugba, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yes.
You were saying that you communicate at length with your students. You post announcements and you let them know that I'm here for you. And Miriam, I really appreciate, you know, your experience, you know, for several years now doing this asynchronously. And do you feel it's effective enough? Are we emotionally connecting to our students?
I can talk on my situation. Actually, my emails are a little bit different. Before the announcements, I always ask them, I tell about myself. You know, I mean, you can understand my personality. I reflect this personality to the students. I always tell them about myself, how my week is going, and I always check on their well-being. And after that, very nicely introduce them the announcement, because when I was a student, I hated the announcements. So I don't want them to have the same experience. So I have better communication with them, I guess, because I ask them also one simple question. Tell me something interesting about your week or something. So they send me replies. And as you know, the students of our era, they are very used to texting and communicating through text messages. So they share their information and their lives very easily. So I have good communication with them at this moment. Let's see what happens in the future.
Thank you, Michael, for your question. Yeah, my experience was I feel connected with my students. However, it took me some time. It took me some creativity. I had to record myself instead of typing an email. I recorded, and they look at me and say, "Oh, well, she's taking some time to look for me." And I also, every email or every message that I receive, I always stay well, reply to my students, and I always say thank you. And they learn slowly but surely. They learn to reply to me, "Thank you, Profesora." And that was really nice too, because they are not used to say thank you to the professors. They just walk away from us and that's it. So, and they stay after the class and they ask questions. And the fact that they wanted to participate in the class, and I allowed them to turn off the cameras if they wanted. If no, at least I listened to them, and they use the chat a lot. So I think in a way I connected with them, and some of them continue with my class the following semester, and they were looking for me when we went back to campus. So that was really nice. I'm not gonna say 100%, but most of the students connected with me, and I was able to connect with them in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Fotini, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you very much, both, for your presentation. It's really nice to see all the amazing things that we can do online, and I totally agree with the idea of interconnection. I would be interested in finding out in more detail some of the activities and some of the tasks that you did with your students that were really successful, and share a little bit your experience of why it was successful. It would be nice to hear some examples. Thank you.
Miriam, would you like to begin? Or I can go? Whatever.
Yeah, go, Jubal. Let me look at it.
Okay, so in my courses, of course, through the years, I received more experience and I know what is working better for the students. In my courses, I always use the culture. For instance, in the discussions, we have written discussions for each chapter, and I always introduce different cultural topics. I find videos, articles, any different like Google Earth. I take them to virtually travel to different countries. So they can experience, they can just see whatever they are going to talk about in the discussions. I introduce them songs, food, whatever is relevant to the real world. And later, the other assignments that I'm working on, and it works, is the practicamos or parliamo activities in Italian and Spanish. They, in group, they practice the Italian and Spanish languages, but I give them like guided activities, and it works great because they need to record, and groups need to listen to each other, and they need to comment to the presentations. These are the things that I'm thinking right now because we don't have so much time, but I mean, I would be very happy to share my experience if you want to email me.
Yeah, just very quickly, I did what I do in my classes, in my regular classes face-to-face. One activity that I always do with my students, I made them sing, especially with verbs. I love the song. I found it on YouTube, La Cucaracha, andar anduve, estar estuve. So the conjugation of the verbs. And that's really funny because the students, they really sing the song during the test. And it was like, even in when I was proctoring the exam, they were like singing the song in their mind. So that was an activity that I really like and enjoy. And I was very happy to see that it worked even in asynchronous classes and synchronous classes. So the conjugations obviously are difficult for students, and we need to find a ways. And if they are able to laugh at us, I mean, I'm happy they make fun of me. I really don't care, but as long as they are learning. So that's what I did. I sing with them, and they like it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, to Miriam, what a timely presentation as we're all in this situation. It's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for the interaction. So we're going to move to our next presentation. And the next one is by Elpida, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce your last name right, Skilka? Yeah. Okay, I'll get it in a minute. And she's going to present to us a certification in English in higher education institutes in France, a new language policy that led to controversy. So please, we look forward to your presentation.
Hello, greetings from Strasbourg. Do you hear me? Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so let's try to share my screen. Okay, is it okay for everyone?
I don't see your screen. Does everybody else see it?
No, you need to share, Elpida.
Okay, wait.
Yeah, click the share screen and
but okay, wait, it didn't work. Okay.
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 There we go. So just bring up your presentation and we should be good to go. Thank you.
Okay, now. Thank you. Sorry. So I'm working in a new project this year as a researcher in the University of Strasbourg. So we're going to talk about teaching of English and in particular the certification of in English in higher education in France. So a quick outline, I'm going to start with a short introduction about the French social context today, my purpose and some research questions. Then my data and methods, some basic notions that already exist, and my results in order to finish with a quick conclusion, or my conclusions at least. So as you all know, English is used as a global language or as a lingua franca or as an international language today in studies in higher education, international scientific and academic research and publishing, commercial communication, of course, the internet, job searching, tourism, traveling, culture, and media. A global language, of course, is language used for communication between countries or people who do not share a common mother tongue. I think you're all familiar with the common European framework of the Council of Europe concerning language teaching, language assessment, and language acquisition. So their ultimate purpose is to achieve a greater unity among European Union's members, and to pursue this aim, they adopt a common action in order to create individuals and countries that work in a more plurilingual and pluricultural world. Of course, the social context today is fully digitalized communication, English everywhere on the internet and social media, English as the most frequently taught second language or foreign language. And it exists this conviction also that English is the key to internationalization, sorry, and for language also at the higher education. What about France? The French government, of course, is trying to cope with these all these principles and to develop and promote the language certifications, which are not widely used really as concerning other countries, for example. So they try to give the opportunity to students to sit for facultative paid certifications. So while they're at a university, while they're studying, as for example, for the TOEIC or TOEFL exams or for other languages, or even they're trying to turn these examinations to compulsory for certain degrees, certain diplomas, or certain universities or departments. Also, other high commissions at the higher education, like the commission that gives the engineering titles and diplomas in France, they require that students graduate from with a good command in English. They require 750 points at TOEIC examination, for example. So if not, they cannot get their diploma as an engineer. So in this context, about 2 years ago, on April the 3rd in 2020, the French government published a new decree prescribing English language certification in all higher education institutes in France as compulsory, starting from the next academic year, meaning last year. Yet a lot of motion arose that led to the annulment, not total annulment of the decree, but its postponement for at least 1 year and starting again from 2023. So I am trying to examine this decree and these modifications and how did it work or is it going to work in the higher education in France. So I'm aiming to find how this language policy was applied or started to be applied, which were the types of certification that were chosen by each institute and the organization of the exams, so why these decisions arose controversy and all these negative reactions, and what will happen next, if we can say. So I've studied 10 large public universities. I'm saying large because they have lots of departments ranging from arts and humanities to marketing, law, or engineering. Of course, most of higher education in France is public. That's why I'm saying public universities. Examining, of course, the websites entirely, and then a corpus of their official text, their annual guides for certifications offered, the syllabus, the guides of enrollment and organization of all types of certifications, all the different types, of course, of certifications in France, not only for the English language, which was the case, but other, what they offer. Of course, the degree with all its articles and the modifications, the deliberations of the juries of the universities, the press releases and their announcements, the Common European Framework, and then also the press release of the CLES certificate, which is the national certificate, which was created by the higher education institutes in France. It actually exists, it still exists. Also some interviews, like the interview of the most common certificate provider in France, the company PeopleCert. I'm trying a two-step analysis using some hints, not always directly the framework of the critical discourse analysis, but I'm trying to do a comparative study on of these corpora at a discourse level in order to compare all these documents. Yet also I'm trying to do a more critical analysis of the impact of their arguments, their results, the social side of this analysis of this data. So here you can also see at the top of the photo which was released from the University of Montpellier, for example, that it's time to certify your English. The actual articles of the decree, which recommend that English should be at least the language that should be certified from from external evaluation companies and recognized internationally. The students, they must also prove that they have taken at least one certification in English in order to have their diploma. For example, in particular, Article 4, it's giving the details and the provisions from when they were going to start by 2020, from bachelors for foreign and regional languages, literatures and civilizations, arts and humanities. Also by 2020 for all professional bachelor degrees, like from the technological institutes and engineering degrees also, and by from last year, by the year 2021, for all other bachelor's degrees. So they tried from, like I said, last year to apply this new decree in all the French Republic and the overseas territories. Yet, like I said, a lot of motion arose that made the things more difficult. Of course, this state, the French government had not chosen neither the evaluation a common evaluation body to all universities in France, nor the certification providers. So it was up to universities to make the call for tenders and select the best offer. So my first my first aim was to find the selection criteria the universities used. And of course, which was the most common, was the cost per university, per student. Because the university pays the exam, they try to keep it free for students. Also, if it would be remotely, a remote assessment or a face-to-face assessment, which would cause other problems like logistic costs, organization, rooms, supervision, and everything. Also, the duration of the assessment could be really short, 1 hour or more. The levels from A2 to C2 in the English evaluation, always concerning the common framework, the supervision and monitoring of the exams, the recognition of the certification by international companies and organizations, then the content of the actual assessment it would also have to include always all 4 competencies: reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and how to retrieve the results at the end of the examination. So the final choice would have to be made from working groups that were created within the juries created councils in the universities. So here is the actual resume, Summary of my results. You can see all 10 universities like Sorbonne University, Poitiers, Upper Alsace, Strasbourg, Tours, Lille, Montpellier, Lorraine, Nantes, and Lyon. They all, of course, had to apply the compulsory certifications. That's why I've checked everywhere, and they all of them, they canceled it at the end of last year. They didn't choose all of them the same certification, as you see. So we have the Alticia assessment, for example, for the first two, the Sorbonne and Poitiers, or Bright test for the University of Upper Alsace, or language cert for Strasbourg or Montpellier. And some of them, like Lille or Lorraine, Nantes, they kept going with the TOEIC examination. Why am I saying kept going? Because these universities, they already had other types of certification in English, for the English language, and they still have, and they're going to continue. Like, for example, you can see at the last column, they have the CLES, the national certificate created from the universities. CLES, it exists for many other languages also. We can certify German or Spanish, Italian, I think. But for CLES English, then TOEIC or TOEFL, IELTS, which is from the British Council, or other Cambridge exams, Lingua Skill, or language cert, like I said. So all of them, they offered at all times CLES and TOEIC, but they didn't always choose the TOEIC exam, because I can imagine it could be mostly financial reasons. Here you can see, for example, at the top from the University of Upper Alsace, Université de Haute-Alsace, the other types of certification that they offer. Then at the bottom from the University of Strasbourg, the annulment of the decree, which says that on the 7th of June in 2022, the decree has to be postponed. Or the deliberation of the University of Lorraine and the vote of the professors and the staff in order to postpone this decision. So for the French government, English is a priority in order to improve the first language acquisition level, or second language English, or first foreign language, and encourage the French to learn and certify their English. They try to promote the national and international collaboration of governmental and non-governmental institutions engaged in the development of methods of teaching and evaluation in this interactive world. They try to meet the needs of a multilingual and multicultural world and avert the marginalization of those students or people lacking the necessary skills to communicate in this world. The French government also thinks, their first argument, that they follow the common frameworks principles, like to compete and complete the effective European system on education, teaching, research, and information and technology. They try to equip all Europeans for the challenges of intensified international mobility and have a closer cooperation, not only in education, but then in life, in culture, science, in industry also. They think they try to promote this mutual understanding and tolerance and respect all different identities and cultural identities. And they try to cope with this development of the ability of Europeans to communicate with each other across linguistic and cultural boundaries. However, a lot of unions, students and professional, higher education staff, professions raised awareness that these arguments of the government are not actually real. They are more concerned about the public character of the higher education in France. They point out the danger of introducing English certification by private institutions, that this is going to disrupt the public character and free education in France. Also, there is the problem of the hegemony or dominance of English and the marginalization of other languages, which they say it's not actually multilingual. This is a non-respect of the European Union's and the Common Framework's principle of multilingualism. They also say that certification threatens a large part of other language courses and other certifications, like we said, that are already offered in many departments and higher educations and language centers in France. Also, they raise awareness about some certification bodies, some providers, that they do not comply with general data protection regulations, not at all times. So they suggest the higher education institutes keeping the national type of assessment, the class, like we said, that was created by the higher education system, and why to move on another certification, which is could be private, had to be private, because they say class has already a good reputation, is widely known and recommended, and also students already like and know how it works. Also, it is not really expensive. I mean, for students is free, but for universities it's not expensive. And it also does not have a validity period, like, for example, TOEFL or TOEIC, not only just years, but a lifelong certification. Here quickly, you can see from.
I just wanted to interrupt saying we've got only got 5 minutes left. So we want to make sure we have rooms for some interaction. Thank you.
Thank you. So quickly to sum up, here you can see just that France has more or less a public expenditure on education institutes. And then to sum up the controversy, that this they say that this injunction comes in a difficult period of a health crisis. So it goes against this multilingual policy, the ethics of public service of universities and the diplomas that already exist, the pedagogical approaches and other university courses. The universities also ask, this is still in petition, the state to reimburse the cost for this certification for last year. And they think that the French higher education institutes, that they are already strongly engaged in actions and initiatives to create and be part of this multilingual world. Because they show this commitment of the by having already applied a lot of different types of certifications and different types teaching different foreign languages, a lot of widely spoken or lesser used languages. So more or less that's the same. I think I can conclude by saying that this controversy, in my opinion, has led to this controversy between the state, French government and the higher education institutes raises the need of a more explicit institutional language policy for each university, of course, in cooperation with the state, but in order to see what are they going to do next. Are they going to postpone it again? Is still a discussion. Are they going to continue with this degree, or even elaborate more, even propose more types of certifications or more languages, or why only English, they actually say.
Wow. Thank you so much. There's a lot of controversy here in this presentation. I could see that. I just wanted to say that we have room for maybe one question. Jan, I'll open the floor to you.
Thank you. Hi. Really interesting. Another very important presentation, Elpida. Just a question, really, because I think I take your point, and obviously being British, this is maybe a biased question, but I do know that, for example, in the UK, we have a lot of trouble with outward mobility on student exchange, because British students, A, are reluctant to go abroad, and B, are not terribly good at languages. So this is one of the troubles of the international landscape, as it were. Another related point is the Grande École. They teach a lot in English, and so they are dominating the international recruitment landscape in France. How much do you think the Grande École have driven this policy? Because in order to compete, the public institutions need to teach in English. And I say this because I know, I work closely with Université of Savoie, and they've had to teach more and more courses in English in order not only to attract international students who might not necessarily speak French, but also in order to attract British, US, Canadian students, Australian students to their study abroad programs. So there's an additional dynamic in the sense that, yes, it's maybe a hegemony of English, but English is perhaps, even if we look at medieval universities, operating in Europe like a lingua franca, and that it allows, I believe, in mobility in the broader sense, mobility through the higher education sector.
Thank you very much. I agree with you, because I think I've also found that I don't come from France. I'm actually Greek, so I started my studies in Greece. And I also think that the huge problem here in France is that they don't really like, students don't really like a lot of mobility. Not really, they like learning a lot of languages, but they're really hesitant towards English, which is bizarre, I think. But I think I agree with you that English is like the lingua franca of today. So I think that the decisions of the French government to promote this type of, at least have a good command of English in order to cope in this world, was in the right direction. But they had probably to work more and cooperate more with universities and this type of public character, in order not to touch their actual power, or weaken the power of this public character of the universities. But I do think that this multilingualism could be also not threatened, but actually aided, helped with English.
Thank you so much, Alpida. That was an amazing presentation, and I'm glad to have learned more about it. Now, I believe we're going to reach the end of our session. Margarita, I believe we're going to lunch now.
Yes, we will stop for about an hour now. So lunch for some, dinner for some others, drink for some others, a coffee, I don't know. It's international. So Tugba just came from a night of Mykonos. As we discussed about it, because it's too early there, and she told me I will feel like I'm going out, and I came just back. So
I'm motivating myself.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much, and we will be back at about 2:30 time in Greece for the roundtable discussion with the theme Learning and Teaching in Time of Crisis. And this is actually a session in collaboration with Royal Holloway University of London and Kaplan, Singapore. So see you in about an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So we continue the second day of our two overlapping conferences, the 7th Annual International Conference on Communication and Management, and the 3rd International Conference on Education, with a roundtable discussion entitled Learning and Teaching in Time of Crisis. That is actually a session of the online symposium on learning and teaching in time of crisis, organized by Royal Holloway University of London and Kaplan, Singapore. So the roundtable facilitators, Aison de Moraes, Senior Lecturer, School of Business and Management, from the University of London, and the panelist, Professor Catherine Harbot, lecturer in digital innovation and analytics, School of Business and Management from the University of London, Professor Donald Tant, myself, Professor Paul Kazat, and the closing remarks by Professor Jurgen Rudolph, Head of Research, Kaplan Higher Education, Singapore. So the floor is yours, dear Ison.
Thank you very much, Margarita. Thank you for to be here, and it is a pleasure, to be all of you here now for this panel with my colleagues here. I will leave, for them, as the team, it is, learning and teaching in time of crisis. And so the idea here is to give some time, for each of the panelists, to talk about this topic. I have already, forwarded them to all of them, some ideas that we would like, to discuss here today. So I'll give you around 5 minutes, for each of you, to discuss and, of course, introducing yourselves. Just to let you know that Dr. Catherine Harbot is the director for our RHOL, or Royal Holloway, University of London, and Kaplan in Singapore. We work together. She's obviously, here at Royal Holloway, and Paul Kazat from my department in strategy and international business and entrepreneurship. So yeah, thank you for being here. And Dr. Donald Tan, I know him for many years. We work together and as a team between me and here and in Singapore. So thank you very much, Donald, to be here with us today. We appreciate very much. So the floor is yours now. So let's, and of course, Margarita already introduced herself. So perhaps, Margarita, you can start, discussing your points and about the topic.
Okay, with pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for accepting this united presentation, as we are able to have and share knowledge a lot more. What I thought when taking a look at the theme of this roundtable discussion, learning and teaching in time of crisis, was a study that we co-created with other academics from around the world. And it's entitled Pedagogy in the Time of the Pandemic, from Localization to Globalization. And it was a co-creation, as I said, and I will share it in the chat for everybody if interested to read. So the point was how we respond in higher education to the stopping of the pandemic. We have captured anecdotal set of responses within and across countries, even institutions of higher education in 7 different countries. So USA, Greece, Singapore, UK, Canada, Australia, and Denmark. Our study considers an adaptation for local differences in an attempt to identify new paradigms that conceptualize not only teaching and learning, but also evaluating. And just some points that our research have revealed is that we need leadership from us all, compassion for each other, and prudent decision-making, changes to courses and curricula that must respond to emotional needs of students. Third, a sense of campus community need to be nurtured, and the needs of students and faculty must drive the choices of technology and not the reverse. And some other conclusions and findings, but I think it's enough, and I will share the study, of course, for everybody if interested. That's from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Margarita. Yeah, so, there are some insights there. Let's see, what other colleagues, perhaps, I don't know, Katerina, Kat, would you like to start?
Yeah, surely. So when I looked at Ailson's list of topics we might talk about, the first one was, how did you handle the COVID-19 pandemic in your teaching and classroom? And I was thinking back, and I think my first reaction to news about the pandemic and the effect it might be having on teaching was panic. And I don't think I was alone in that. And but then realizing that lots of things were achievable if we thought about it carefully, and registered myself on Zoom, started giving lectures and workshops online from, I think, about a week, the weekend after. We've got an email on a Friday and I was teaching online on Monday, because I'd found that lots of my students were not turning up. So it wasn't compulsory at Royal Holloway until a week later than that, but I started teaching online so that I would actually be able to, because it was near the end of term, they had an assignment due in, I wanted to give them as much help as possible. So I would actually be able to interact with them, not in the most ideal fashion, but able to interact with them. So that was in March. So that was towards the end of our academic year in terms of teaching. So we then had the summer to think about what we were going to be doing next. And so I am in the Department of Digital Innovation and Management in the School of Business and Management at Royal Holloway. And during the relevant period, I was coordinating teaching three different modules, a first year Foundations in Digital Enterprise, sort of basic MIS course, a final year course on data analytics, and a master's course on database and web technologies. So my courses are fairly technical and require quite a lot of use of computer, normally what would be in our open access PC labs. So students would all be working together. I would be demonstrating a few things. They would be doing things for themselves, and I would be going around and helping them and showing them where they'd gone wrong and how they could improve things. So obviously this was not going to be possible under lockdown. And although we started the first term of the next academic year not under lockdown, we were already limiting. So we were limiting how much access time we had to PC labs, the numbers of people in PC labs, etc., etc. Which meant that actually I did not have any scheduled time in PC labs for my classes. And as soon as we got to lockdown, it wouldn't have made any difference anyway. So over the summer, I had to think about that. How are we going to make this work when a lot of the teaching on the classes that I was doing involved sitting at computers and working with computing, so Excel or various different database design packages and database using databases and using analytics. So over the summer, what I had to do was look through all the software that I normally used and work out what would be possible on students' own devices, because they were going to have to work on their own devices rather than open access PC labs. So I had to think about not just stuff that would work on Windows-based PCs, which was what I normally thought about, but I had to think about things for Macs as well. So I changed some of the software I was going to use. I had to rewrite all my instructions. I had to test everything out. So it was making sure that what I'd thought of as a solution would work for students and that they could feel confident that the instructions I gave them would work. So I had to do a lot of testing. I even borrowed a Mac. I'd never allowed a Mac in the house before. Borrowed a Mac to test everything out and make sure that everything would work. So I think that's important, that if you have to change things, you must make sure that it actually works so that the student has confidence in what you're doing as a change to whatever you normally do. That was no small task. It took huge amounts of time to do that. I was doing that all over the summer and basically all over the next academic year. At some points, I was sort of checking things out the night before I was supposed to be teaching. It took so long. I think one of the biggest obstacles that our institutions experienced in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I don't think that we are alone in this, is actually not being prepared. We've been spending years and years and years, we taught in a certain style. You do your lectures in a lecture theatre, you do your workshops in a smaller room or in a PC lab or whatever you happen to be doing. And we were all used to how that worked. And then suddenly we had to do something totally different and we weren't prepared for it. And I don't think we're the only university. I think most universities were not prepared for this. because we didn't do much teaching online. I mean, we got as far as recording lectures, so all our lectures were recorded and the videos were available to students afterwards, but it wasn't, we hadn't thought about having to teach entirely online. I think only the Open University in this country was something that was the one that taught everything online. No, none of the other universities did. So preparedness, I think, was lacking. And I suppose you can't see into the future and know what's going to happen, but perhaps this has taught us that you do have to just think a little around things and what might be difficult and what might be possible. I think the other obstacle within our institution was that we were asked to do things. We made changes to how we taught for the first year when there were lots of lockdowns. We had to do things very quickly, very rapidly. Took a lot of thinking, a lot of changing, a lot of thinking around things, how things are going to work, how we're going to make it work. And then it happened again. So the next year, okay, so now it's not 100% online, now it's 50-50. So then you've got to think again, this is different. Again, you can take some things from what you did when you were purely online, but you've got to think about different things again. And now we're coming into the next academic year and we're back at 100% face-to-face. So we've had 3 years of huge disruption. And I think one of the things we can take from that is what were the good things about teaching online that we can take forward now that we're 100% face-to-face. So one of the things I used to find in my lectures when I was 100% face-to-face is that I would have the same dozen students who would answer the questions. So if I'd ask questions in my lectures, which I tend to, I don't want to just stand there and speak to them for a whole 50 minutes. I would ask questions, or we would have discussions or whatever. We try to have discussions, and the same people would always answer. And in the first year of online teaching, I was putting the questions into the chat, and I was still finding the same 10, 20 people are answering the questions in the chat. And I think that's a shame. I think we need more people to be able to engage themselves in the thinking or the things that we're trying to do. So in the last year, when we were 50-50, I tried to put in not just questions in the chat, but I would have activities for them to do, which might be a range of things. So I might ask them to answer a question or to do something via Moodle. I used some HP5 stuff so that they were more interactive or prettier looking or more gamified or whatever, not just ticking boxes or selecting options. So they were actually doing things. So I think one of the things I always try and do in my lectures is not just listening and absorbing information, but doing things so that they actually practice what I'm talking about. So I tried to take some of the things, and I'm going to be doing for this next coming year, some of the things that I did when I was online, because that was the only way of making people be able to do things, because discussion is very difficult online unless you've got a small group who are well behaved. And when you've got hundreds of students, in theory, I think I had about 400 or 500 students, but not all of them always turned up. Trying to get discussions going with that number of students is difficult. I did try out using breakout rooms, and that often did not work well at all. Okay, because you'd find one person would be doing stuff in a breakout room, nobody else would. It worked very well actually with my master's students, which was not such a big group, and they all knew each other. They would all put their videos on when we were in meetings. Undergraduates didn't work at all well. So breakout groups I decided were not working, and I abandoned them, and the students didn't like them anyway. So I thought of other things, lots of different activities that they can do to see whether they've understood what I'm talking about. And I think that's very important. Confucius, I think, said something along those lines. You have to not just see things and read them, but you have to actually do them to know that you really understand them. But that's probably a quote totally out of context, and I can't base up where it comes from. Okay, so engagement, very important. And I think the other thing that I thought was really, really important was support. So the way that I did this was being very available, being very responsive. I set up a question and answer forum for each week, so they could put questions there, so they wouldn't get lost in a massive great question and answer forum, but something that was focused more on what each week's topics. The same for assignments. They could post questions there and see the answers that I gave. If student emailed me with an interesting question, I would post it on Moodle, on the discussion forum, the relevant discussion forum again, so they could see them, and that sort of thing. So being very responsive, making sure that students are engaged, and giving very clear instructions for everything are the things that I was taking from how I had to react to the teaching in a time of crisis. The students were all quite nervous, so they needed extra support. They needed to feel confident that what I was doing was what I was telling them to do would work, and they also needed to feel that there was somebody they could ask if something stopped working and get an answer quickly. So I would give very quick answers, even working over weekends, to make sure that students got answers to their emails. So for those 2 to 3 years, my work hours during the week were nowhere near what they should have been. They were about double, perhaps not quite double, but anyway, I seem to be working all the time if I wasn't asleep. Okay, so rather sort of unfocused remarks, but I hope you might take something useful for that. Now, breakout rooms seemed like such a good idea, and I was really enthusiastic about them, but it just didn't work. But teaching my computer-based stuff actually did work reasonably well. I was very worried about that as well, but I demonstrated stuff online and then got students to do it in their own time and helped them if they had any problems.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Paul,
Catherine.
I've stolen some of Paul's words.
Yeah, just before we move on to Paul and Donald, the experience, just a few points here, and then I'd like to take, I think Bigum, you have a question, right? You put your hand up.
No, thanks. I don't have a question.
No, but we read, some of your information, on the chat. A call, you have a question. I'll pass the button to you just a second, just to make. I would like, to share with you that with me, most of the time, I wouldn't say all the time, but most of the time, my experience in breakout rooms were actually the opposite of what Catherine is saying here. I did have very good communication with the students in terms of breakout rooms. And actually, I would like to praise here, especially my students from Singapore. Yes, they don't turn on their cameras most of the time. However, when I work with them, in breakout rooms, and I gave them an activity to present, for example, in slides, a presentation, and then share in the classroom, even though the cameras were off, most of the time they did a fantastic job. Of course, I shouldn't say here that more than half of these students were part-time students who are also working. So they have a different, approach, to education than perhaps, the full-time students. And yes, with the postgraduate students is different. They work quite well with breakout rooms. Just to share with you that here with my students from Kaplan, they did a brilliant job, in breakout rooms and presentations in class. But yeah,
can I just make a comment there, Elson?
Please, Catherine. Yeah.
So Alfred Yong has said that he found that breakout rooms meant that the activities stretched to much longer than you'd planned for them, and that was my finding as well. So it took students much longer to work out what they needed to do. And so if you timetabled your lecture with 5 minutes for this activity or 10 minutes for this activity, which is what the time it would take in a lecture theatre, you would find it would take twice as long at least if you did it through a breakout room. And yes, I had to keep going around the breakout rooms to interact with the students, and see what they were doing, put them back on course. And it worked fine. As I say, when I had a master's class, which was quite small, I could do that. But with hundreds of students, it really just did not work.
Yeah, I should say here, in response, Catherine, that with the Kaplan students, because we have more time with them, online.
You do have much more.
For example, we could give them an activity and say, okay, you have 20 minutes to do this activity, and then break out them in rooms. So this was quite different than on campus where we have only a few minutes. But there are lots of information, lots of thoughts, on the chat. Please have a look. Maybe we can't, touch on all of them, but there are some very good points, made there. But I'd like, to pass, first of all, to Carl. Carl, good to see you again, here, at least online.
Thank you very much. So I actually must admit that I enjoyed the time when we were online, and that's because I was doing part of my job, especially supervision, online in the last 5-6 years. So it came not as a shock to me. But I have 2 observations I wanted to share with you. Number one, the problem with the big group and the smaller group. In the big group, there are some things that do not work that work in smaller groups. So, and this is also a question of money, of time, and time is money, right? So that means if you want to invest into the learning of your students, you have to invest money wherever it comes from the state or from the fees or whatever. So what we did, and we did that before Corona already, we have lectures, and parallel to the lectures, we have what we call exercises, smaller groups of 30 students, where the students actively work with another teacher or facilitator, you could say, work actively with the stuff that we were trying to kind of give an overview in the lectures. So that means it's actually a division of labor. And that means that the breakout rooms were not, the breakout rooms were the exercises actually, right? So where the students were for most, much more active, and I agree very, very much, they learn best when they should explain to their peers what the whole thing is about. So this was the first one. The second one was, it's very important what happens in between these touch points, lectures or smaller groups, because the students should do on their own or in smaller groups a lot of learning themselves in between, meaning reflecting on what they have learned, and you should always ask them what they think they have learned, and preparing for the next round. So I think that could help to solve the problem, but it's not cheap to solve the problem of the big lectures, to split them into smaller groups and combine it with what is going on in the lectures. And still, of course, in the lectures, you should have interactive elements. Otherwise, the students fall asleep as they do in the face-to-face lecture. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Carl. Some food for thought, for all of us here. I know, I believe it's Chris Smith, mentioned, some points, here on the chat as well, and his own experience, here. Yeah, please read, on the chat. But I'd like, to give, the floor now to Paul, yeah, and then Donald, please. So, Paul, What's your experience?
Hi everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. And it's been quite nice even so far. And I'll be brief because Catherine already mentioned a lot of things I was thinking about, and it's nice to see we align ourselves. But I suppose the question is, in times of crisis, and I suppose it's the pandemic, of course, we can't avoid sparing a thought for those who are not with us anymore. But for me, for everyone, it's been difficult, you know, and my experience is I struggle as much as the student did struggle. But I had great colleagues, you know, like Elson and Sinfrey, and but I did struggle. I think I put on the way, and I just managed to do the teaching, and yeah. I did learn a lot in terms of skilling myself and digital tools and Padlet and all those different Menti and Kahoot. There's a new one now, is VBooks. I need to check that, but yeah. So I think that there were great opportunities related to the crisis. I mean, always. My biggest regret is probably the group work, online group work, and the breakout rooms. I don't need to repeat myself. But now I'd like to add 3 thoughts on what I think we went wrong. Well, according to me, and I'm just a humble lecturer on this, but yeah. I think the first things I think we got it wrong was we overreacted. And I think, Kat, you mentioning that point as well. We had a whole change in the pedagogy. And I think it was also connected to the idea that, okay, skip research is not so important, focus on teaching, do something new, and so on. And we had to do a lot of repackaging everything. That was quite challenging. And I must say here, it also has to do with our well-being, you know, and the workload. And Kat, you mentioned we were working on the weekend, you know, barely stopping just to get the lecture going, you know. So I think that was one point we got wrong. Second point we got perhaps wrong was connected to this is we try to maintain the same number of hours. And I'm saying it's not wrong to do this, but we relied a lot on self-study time. That means students having to do more self-study to catch up. And I think it was delusional. In time of crisis, it's delusional to ask students to, okay, you have to review that slide, you have to do that lecture recording. That was delusional. And I think we got wrong here. We put a lot of pressure on the students and distress because of the assessment anyway. And the third thing we got wrong probably, and it's more technical, is we relied too much on video recording. In my view, it did not work very well. And at the beginning, I don't know if you were like me, but I published 30-minute long lecture recording. That was just unbearable for the students, you know, and I was checking the analytics and I had 0 views, you know. So I think we got wrong there. We got definitely wrong, but we got right in one point, which is we adjusted the assessment. So now we can discuss the adjustment, but I think that was needed. And that was a very good thing to do, taking into account student well-being. I want to move on to how we can be more meaningful in terms of in the pandemic, but also other crises. And I've got 3-4 points to make. First one is that we need to continue to be authentic. If you're not doing well, or student not doing really well, we need to show maybe our authenticity here. And I read in one of the Harvard education newsletter something that I think resonated with me, which was connect with empathy, but lead with compassion. And it resonated with me because I think many of us, and I know Sin3, you will connect with that idea, we took on a lot during the pandemic to care for our students. In other words, and I read the newsletter was written, we felt a lot with the students, but we sometimes did not protect ourselves much. So maybe more compassion and less empathy. I'm here with you, but but not necessarily, but you need to protect myself. Then I think connected to this, I want to know, and I'd like to have your input on that. How do we create a community with the students and with the staff as well, where everyone is comfortable, where students connect with each other, they make friendships, you know? And I must say in Kaplan, the Kaplan program, I've seen in the full-time students cohort, I could see students really connecting together. They had a WhatsApp group, obviously, but they were really cracking a lot of jokes and all that. And in times of crisis, if we have strong communities like that in the classroom, I think we are getting it right. So how do we build friendship in academia? Students, staff friendships, and that connects with your ideas, Cynthia Nelson, your paper, and student and staff. How can we partner? How we be friends with students? And then I think my last point, and I'll keep it there then, but I think it forced me as well, the pandemic forced me to rethink how meaningful my teaching is. Suddenly, you have this whole context. It's hard to teach random small business things, you know? So we need to reconnect to the reality. And maybe we need to discuss bigger ideas as well in relation to the discipline. So how can we discuss big ideas? How can we discuss big ideas? Not too generic. So we need to be quite specific as well. How can we reconnect to the real world while, you know, also ensuring employability of students? How can we maybe have more theory sometimes, but also making it employable? And well, I would say, how can we have debates, have societal debates, things that matter in the classroom, but making it relevant to students' degree and employability as well. That's it for me, and I'm really want to hear your inputs on all that later on. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Some very good food for thoughts. There are two hands. We need to be very quickly, okay? So I'm just gonna give the floor again to Cole and then Begum, and then we need, you know, to move on to what is Donald's experience, you know, from Singapore and his students, you know, probably from all of from other countries as well. So Carl, very quick, you know, what is your next point, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. I almost agree with everything you said. Although, point one, the struggle and the change of pedagogy. I haven't seen a change of pedagogy at all, because we were only looking at the how question, not at the what should the students learn, why should the students learn it, and then we could answer the how. So I do not agree that there was a change. There was a change in the media we used. Then the pressure on the students. I saw it different, because the everyday life of the students was full of fluidity. There was no structure anymore. The only structure that they had was lectures, workshops, group works, supervision, and preparing for it. So it gave, at least I talked to my students, it gave them a kind of structure. And number three, video recorder. Yeah, that's something that maybe the devil has invented. I agree fully. We started by, we were forced to start with a default of pre-recorded. It didn't work. We asked the students, what should we do? We took the students on board and said, we struggle, you struggle, we know it. We don't have the answer. We have to find the answers, how to do that in a meaningful way together. So we said, we are not in control here. We have the same struggles as you, and we are building the ship. At the same time, we are sailing.
That's a very good point, Carl, especially the last one about democracy between, academics and the students, asking their help, this is very important. Yeah. Thank you so much. Begum, do you have a short question?
I have a short comment. I agree with the presenters and the other comments, but I just want to make a short comment. Yes, I think pandemic has also posed some challenges regarding equality, because we know that some parts of the world do not have access to internet, and that also limits the online education for certain types of countries. And in this sense, I think some non-governmental organizations or charity movements can take steps. I know that some of them take in order to reduce this unequal distribution of technology. I mean, because if you don't have a laptop, or if you don't have access to a smartphone, then it will be impossible for the poor students to get this education. And during lockdown, this was really unfair for some people. Thanks.
Begum, your points regarding technology, very, very important. Yeah, of course, we are here, yeah, in the UK, in Singapore, in some other countries where most people have access to technology. But I come from a country in Latin America, in Brazil, where many students, millions of students were in big trouble because they don't have, especially, at the primary and secondary schools. I was absolutely astonished, for example, when I checked, some of the schools in Brazil where there is not even a website. So you can imagine, these students, didn't have anything to do, basically. And according to, some scholars there, they have lost actually 2 years in education. Yeah, so very, very, very good points. Catherine, very quick points, if you don't mind, so we can hear, Donald from Singapore, please.
Has somebody not spoken yet? If not, I'll make my comment later. It's not important.
Okay, so you make yours later on, and we'll move on to Donald. Yeah, thank you very much. Donald, yeah, it's always good to see you again. I hope we're looking for a word, to meet you again, actually, next month, face-to-face in Singapore.
Okay, good. Elson, thank you so much. I just want to share a little bit. I think the pandemic has caused many of us to, adapt to the changes. And I would say that, from a classroom environment to working from home and back to a hybrid model for some was indeed challenging. But one of the few things I did was to take note that, if I can't run the class properly, it affects every single student. So therefore, I took it upon myself that, whatever software there was, I need to take it upon myself to make sure I'm very familiar, because the student is going to look to me whenever they have problems. They're going to, when they can't hear me or they can't see me, they're going to ask me that question. And if I'm not familiar with the tools I'm working with, I can't help them. So this was one of the first thing that I took on to make sure that I have the necessary knowledge of the hardware and the software to address, questions when they're trying to do an online class with me. So even for me, myself, when I was working from home, I felt that my own computer was not good enough. It was necessary for me to have extra screens so that I could prepare my materials on one screen and, see the class on another. That actually helped to facilitate the lectures online much better. But as what I think some of you mentioned earlier, that, yeah, even when you do breakout rooms, students are not participating. We have to take on many hats during the pandemic, and I started to try to find out what was the issue. And I teach both full-time classes and part-time classes, and we do have quite a lot of international students studying at Kaplan. Some of the things require us to be a little bit more flexible and to adapt in a way, because we have students whose country was just under coup, like the military coup in Myanmar. And you have students who are in that situation where they are in and out of classes. And here they are worried about their families. Here they are having to fight for their safety, you know. Sometimes it's really difficult for them to be mandatorily in class. We have part-time students who are in the front line, they are healthcare workers, and they can't spare the time to come to class because they are trying to save another life at the hospital. And you know what really hit me home was, I had a student who was missing class and I tried to reach out to him outside class. And he just lost his dad to COVID. And even if we were to extend the assignment due date, I don't think he was in a position to finish it, having lost a loved one. So I think the pandemic also has opened up a lot of things that we used to run in a very political manner. And I think it calls for us to be a bit more understanding. And sometimes, you know, as what mentioned, that some students may have productivity problems, you know, they can't be in class. But of course, they are there for the education. So we need to find what's a good so-called balance. And I agree that, you know, sometimes we may want to test and grade the student in a different way than what we used to, because it may seem unfair for some of them who do not have this opportunity. I spoke to some students, I took extra time to speak to some students, and they told me that sometimes, you know, at home, it's really not conducive for them to attend class. You know, here they are trying to listen to class, and there behind them, they have, you know, screaming parents or screaming kids that they have to pay attention to. So all these things have added up, you know, unnecessarily, you know, to the students in terms of trying to cope with schoolwork. But having a big class doesn't help, because having a big class doesn't allow us to focus our attention on individual students sometimes. You know, we don't really know everyone, but having a small class, those classes that I had less number of students, it allowed me to really connect with them and to follow up on some of them, to really see outside classroom what were the issues. And this was what I found out. And this was some of the issues that I thought that, you know, how we could have done it better. When we are doing hybrid, unfortunately, we meet with another set of problems. Again, you know, most of the settings in the classrooms are traditionally face-to-face. And when we try to have a hybrid, sometimes the in-classroom equipments are not equipped enough to address both people who are in class as well as those who are online. And sometimes when we focus too much on the discussion in class, you know, some of them will actually drop out. And we do have students who eventually, you know, they log on and they just disappear. And when you call their names, you know they are not there, because even after 3 hours, they are not responding to you. So sometimes these are the people that I try to follow up with them to see what's really going on, you know, but some of them really just cannot follow the class when it's online. So there are a lot of all these issues that pops up. And of course, there are students who take this as an excuse to do something else. So, but there are genuine students that we should take note of, that, yeah, they want to learn, they want to participate, but if they are in a country where things are not so safe, or they are, you know, or they are actually, how do we moderate, you know, the assessment in such a way that there's still learning going on? It doesn't take away the objective of why they're in school, but at the same time, it's something that's fair for everybody in class. So that's my take on during this period of education, that, you know, as what was brought up, you know, there was some level, there wasn't a fair level playing field for everyone, especially for those who have to face the crisis in a different way. Okay, and I agree, yeah, it was a pretty stressful period, because we are here trying to make sure the students, you know, so we were speaking to 5, 10 students, checking on their wellness, and there we are. What about us? It was stressful. It was stressful. Yeah. So we had to really manage our own mental health to just try to help the students. And it was a sad thing to, sometimes you are just so lost for words. We don't even know how to console the students when they are faced with those crises. Yeah. Well, that's what I have to share. So I hope it's something useful that we can also start thinking about. Moving forward, there are other ways of, helping the student.
Thank you very much, Donald. Yeah, very much useful. Yeah, we could discuss, a few points. Well, quite a lot of points actually, made by all the speakers, today here. But we don't have much time left, so we only have about 10 minutes, 9 minutes each, actually, to finish the sections on time. So one thing I just like to say, is first of all is to say thank you. Yeah, of course, to all of you who have shared your experiences, here. We could go on and on. But one thing, I believe that we became stronger in many ways. Yeah, in many ways, we as academics became stronger in technology, savvy, at least I'm speaking about myself, and also, in compassion, and in kindness as well, as Jorgen mentioned before. But let me pass, the ball to Jorgen. Yeah, so for the panelists, I'd like to say thank you very much for all, and for those who have commented as well. So Jorgen, all yours now for the next 8 minutes.
Actually, I'm very happy to tell you that I don't need 8 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
I thought that there was a fantastic panel discussion that you had. And I won't even try, to repeat the main points, but there was much that also resonated with me. And basically, my job was supposed to be to have the closing speech, for the symposium. But now we are obviously in a mixed company, and I thought it was quite funny. Because when we were discussing this with our dear friend Margarita, we had some doubts, which link should we use, and so on. And I think it was actually a stroke of genius, sort of inadvertently, to combine the two events, because now there's yet another opportunity for networking, and I think that's so important. Before we joined the conference, the beautiful conference organized by Margarita, we actually had a very good presentation in the symposium, which is the RHUL Kaplan Symposium that unfortunately took place at the same time. That's why we were away, and now we are back. And Sinfree and Ailson actually presented about team teaching. And in academia, unfortunately, there is this tendency to reward solo teaching and solo research. So if you write a paper all by yourself, and you publish it in a fancy journal, I mean, that is much better, right, than writing a paper with 8 other guys in a not so famous journal and so on. Whereas I think, of course, that is wrong, because I believe that this sense of community is so important, and I think this is what we are achieving. I mean, in my opinion, the symposium went very well, but I should also give Ailson the opportunity to say some final words on that. Just for the ones who weren't at the symposium, let me briefly say we had 2 sections. We were talking about students, and we actually had students and graduates who were sharing their experiences, and unsurprisingly, it very much focused around employability. So we had a lot of really interesting insights about employability. And then the second part, and I think when you were here for the panel, that was half of the second part. That was about education in a time of crisis. And by the way, what I would always like to say, in case you're only associating crisis with COVID, I think that would be perhaps a little bit too narrowly focused, because Donald was also saying, and I have the same experience. I was actually in Myanmar in January and February 2020, and I was teaching an MBA program there, and I had the most wonderful students, and I was kind of looking forward to going back and back and back, and building the friendships. And then, of course, COVID happened, which was completely devastating in Myanmar. And then the coup happened, which was also extremely devastating. And yeah, and I think all these experiences have made me a lot more understanding. And when students don't behave in the way that I would like them to, I don't blow my top. So I kind of always think, what could be the cause, of this interesting behavior that I'm encountering, or not meeting deadlines, or being incommunicando and things like that. So I think we live in a time of polycrisis, many different crises, like the one in Ukraine, that also one of the other speakers at the symposium, Samson Tan, was referring to. So I think it's good to be more compassionate, to be kinder, and be more understanding, and have continuous classroom research, where we don't just wait for our student evaluations many months later, but where we find out continuously what is happening in our classroom. And Donald was also saying he's using a lot of technology. I think that is quite important, isn't it? I mean, technology does not do anything in itself. Technology is just technology. Technology is neither good nor bad. But at the same time, it's good to actually know what kind of technology the students are using, and then to also try to use that technology to connect with them. So not much of a closing words. Just some comments that I thought it was a great first symposium, and I think we'll do it again. And also very happy to be now reconnected with Margarita's beautiful conference. So thank you very much, Margarita, for that great idea to combine the sessions. And back to you, Elson, for
Thank you. Thank you, Jorgen. Thank you very much. I think we only have 1 minute left, right, Margarita?
Yeah.
So I'd like to say thank you very much for all of you. And this was absolutely fantastic to be with all of you here. 3 lessons we learned, here, in my opinion, sense of community, friendship, thanks to Paul for that words, and be very strong. And let's face the challenge or the next challenge. Thank you very much, everyone, for all of you, to be here.
Oh,
great.
as well. Thank you.
Great lesson. Thank you.
And I invite you all in 10 minutes. We have 2 great workshops. The one from Catherine Derry from Canada, and the other from 2 professors from USA and Canada as well. So it's about academia and how we can become better. So if you would like, it would be with pleasure. Thank you very much, and see you in 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, everyone, you can use the same link. Yeah, so, and you can continue here, within 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Have a good day, whatever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hello, Margarita.
Hello. So I believe we can go on now with the workshop entitled Academic Writing in Graduate Studies, led by Catherine Derry, PhD candidate, Faculty of Education, University of Ottawa, Canada. I will read the description just to help the participants getting the climate of the workshop. This workshop aims to provide a greater understanding of peer learning in academic writing groups organized by graduate students using social learning theory developed by Bandura. In that regard, PhD students can develop confidence in their abilities to successfully complete writing projects based on 4 sources of influence: mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, social persuasion, and psychological and emotional states. The workshop leader recommends valuable strategies to develop academic writing competencies through social action led by graduate students, in conjunction with institutional support in the context of higher education. I believe that this workshop enters well with what we have said earlier in the roundtable discussion, and that educators should participate more in such opportunities, international opportunities to learn and exchange knowledge. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen here. I prepared a few slides for you. There we go. And I'm just going to open my chat to make sure that I see it on my screen as well. Can you see my slide well? Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone. It's a true pleasure to join you today from Canada. It's the morning for me, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Education at University of Ottawa. I'm really at the end of my PhD journey because my defense has been scheduled for October 18th, so it's a very exciting time for me. Today, I'll be talking to you about academic writing and in graduate studies. So first, let me explain why I became interested in academic writing. So I actually spent 25 years in the Army as a logistics officer, traveling the world. And during my first career, I developed a writing style that was unique to the military, so very concise and very direct. And when I decided to do my PhD, the first thing that my research supervisor said was that I would have to work on my academic writing. As she put it, I would have to add flowers to my writing. So I decided to make this the central focus of my doctoral dissertation. So if I had to summarize my research interests, they focus on how PhD students use academic writing groups for developing competencies to become accomplished novice scholars. And as you can see on the bottom corner of my screen, I also have a writing assistant that may pop up during my session, so bear with me. So today I'll present results from my PhD research by first discussing the issues with PhD programs, dropout, and academic writing. I'll then explain the framework of social learning theory that Margarita just mentioned with the scholar Bandura, who's a Canadian theorist. And I'll explain the methodology used in my research project. And finally, I'll present some results and make recommendations for the use of academic writing groups in higher education settings. But I do realize this is a workshop and not a communication, so I will definitely invite you to participate throughout the hour by asking you questions. And you're welcome to use the chat to share your ideas or turn on your microphones to speak live. I'm also the second last session of the day, so I have inserted a few things in my presentation to keep it light and fun, even though we're addressing a very serious topic. So starting with the problem statement, since the start of my PhD program, I'm interested in higher education issues, and more specifically in singular challenges faced by students registered in the last echelon of graduate studies. Therefore, in the session, I'll mostly talk about PhD students, but a lot of what what will be discussed also applies to master students. So when we say graduate studies in the title of my workshop, it focuses on master's and PhD students mostly. As you can see on the slide, in Canada, dropout rates in PhD programs fluctuate around 50%, all specialties combined. Even for students who are completing their programs, many of them will extend their studies beyond the deadlines that are established by universities. So I did a quick comparison between Canada and Greece. And looking at this graph from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, we noticed that completion rates are similar between our two countries. The main difference I saw was the disparity between male students, and the male students are illustrated by dots on the screen, and female students, so women are identified by diamonds, obviously. But in Canada, male students are more prone to complete their PhD programs than their female counterparts. And the OECD explains that in part by the fact that more female students will drop out of their study program to attend to family-related responsibilities. So I'll ask you the first question to warm up here. And again, you can use the chat or turn on your microphones. But why do you think PhD students drop out of their study programs besides what I just mentioned, which was to take care of their families? Give you a few seconds to enter your thoughts, share your thoughts. So Margarita, you think it's mostly about family issues as well? Any other thoughts?
May I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
In Greece, I don't know if it's in Canada as well, we have what we say the forever students.
Oh.
Yes, they can arrive at 40 or 50 years old and still they, and I'm not talking only about PhD students, because the system permits to do so. So maybe we should change this and give a time limit.
Yeah, in Canada, there's some universities that are imposing time limits on the programs. So for example, for my university, it's 7 years. You are funded for 4 years, and then after that, it's on your dime. But after 7 years, if you're not really close to defend your thesis, then you won't be able to continue. So yeah, that definitely motivates students to finish their process. We've got Carolyn that said more difficult than they thought it would be, for sure. Yeah, especially for those who are joining graduate programs without having had anyone in their families go to university at those levels. They don't always have the right perception or thoughts or ideas of what they're going to be facing. Jürgen said, unfortunately, I still have some work to do. Okay, so he's going to be back tomorrow. Okay, so when I think of challenges in PhD programs, I think of threats. Maybe that's because of my background. But when I think of threats, the first thing that comes to my mind are dinosaurs. So just bear with me here, but in the next 3 slides, I'll be addressing key challenges that PhD students face in the form of student profiles, highlighting those 3 dinosaurs. So difficulty with the relationship between the student and their research advisor, also the risk of isolation and the lack of academic writing competencies. Oh, we got Bigham who said some decide that research is hard to make unless one wants to pursue a career in academia. That's true. Not all PhD students will end up in academia at the end. Okay, so let's discuss these 3 threats or challenges in terms of student profiles. So the first one is called the director raptor. And that would be a student who's facing dysfunctionalities in their relationship with their research supervisor. So if we look at the characteristics that are listed on the slide and we look at them a bit closer, we can see that a lot of them can affect the development of academic writing skills. If the PhD student does not receive timely feedback or is not properly mentored, that can certainly hinder his progress or her progress. We have to remember, though, that most research supervisors are not trained to supervise PhD students, so they often rely on their own experience when they were themselves PhD students and studying. Therefore, it's really critical for PhD students to express what their needs are clearly. However, PhD students do not always know what those needs are, and will only realize the fact that they could have been better supported later on. But if we look at this profile, the relationship between the student and the advisor is really key to success and key to the development of academic writing skills. And it's an issue that is widely covered in scientific literature. And during the 25 interviews that I conducted for my doctoral research, there's 40% of participants that named this issue as their most significant challenge. So it's definitely to keep in the back of your minds. The second dinosaur is the isolationorics. This would be a student profile that reflects individuals who are isolating from others for various reasons. So as you can see, they could be too busy. When we're in graduate studies, we're super busy, not just with our studies, but also with any other type of projects that we want to get involved in to build our CV to be more attractive on the labor market later on. Sometimes you get students that would rather study alone. You've got those that are thinking that people are not interested in their work, or they feel like they're progressing slower than their peers. They lack the money. So financial issues is definitely something to consider as well for dropout rates. And they may prioritize family because they don't have a lot of time. So that becomes their priority. So isolation is frequently observed under normal circumstances, but it has definitely been exacerbated during the pandemic. So PhD students need to be very careful that their isolation does not transform into loneliness, which then would affect their mental state. And the third student profile here would be the Writosaurus. So we're really getting into academic writing with this dinosaur here. And that's a graduate student who's lacking academic writing competencies. So most of the time, students will not have received formal academic writing training. So they really proceed by trials and error. And because they're uncertain about the quality of their writing, they may procrastinate, and or they're afraid to ask for assistance, especially to the ones that are in charge of evaluating or assessing their performance. They also get discouraged when receiving feedback. So there's never a time when you send a document to a university professor and you will not get any feedback. There's always new ideas, new things that you can read. So it's a endless cycle of revision that may be discouraging for some students, or they feel like an imposter in the world of academia. And I'll discuss the imposter syndrome again in a few minutes. So that gives you like 3 profiles of students that may be prone to dropping out from their program. But there's many other reasons why PhD students may feel discouraged from their studies. And these factors can be listed under 2 main categories. So it's either falling under institutional responsibilities or individual responsibilities. And some of those factors are also shared. And Margarita asked me if the dinosaur idea was mine. Yes, it was. So you enjoyed it?
I love this, really. Great. I mean,
big threats for PhD students. Yeah, so for this workshop, I'm really going to focus on the last one on the right at the bottom. which is the perceived academic competencies, and mostly talking about academic writing skills. So what is academic writing? We all think we really know what it is, but if we really deconstruct the process of writing, it's an iterative process that has a lot of going forward, moving backwards. So it's not a straight line from start to finish. It involves several strategies that you have in the model on the left here that was developed by one of my research team. So looking for resources, planning your work, focusing, concentrating on your work, a lot of reading, obviously, discussion with others, and then those reviews that I mentioned already. And let's not forget relaxation. And that's really key to academic writing. Because most of the time when you're writing a document, you need to put it aside and leave it for a few days, if not for a few weeks, to make sure that your brain keeps on thinking about things. And when you get back to it, sometimes you have new ideas, or you're able to definitely improve what you've written already. And taking a step back and making sure that you take care of yourself and you do some leisure activities will also activate the creative part of your brain. And that's when some really innovative ideas will come forward. So it's important to relax. And sometimes we tend to forget that we need to relax in academia. On the right side, you have two different definitions of academic writing. One that is really just about the act of putting words on the screen or on paper. And the second one, definition B, is the creation of a new product after reviewing the work of others on a topic of interest. For the sake of this workshop, we'll use the second definition because that's really the one that we're interested in. As I mentioned, PhD students do not receive formal training to develop the norms and the practices associated with university level writing. So these writing skills are required to produce a dissertation, obviously, but also all kinds of other types of documents. So many forms, as you can see on the list here, course assignments for the mandatory course load, but also scientific articles that are very complex to master as a novice scholar, book chapters, conference proposals, and then funding applications as well. And if you start teaching, then you've got your course syllabus too. And all those experiences, they help PhD students to prepare to become a scholar for those who want to join academia, because scholars these days are involved in all kinds of dimensions, going from research to teaching to administration, but also expected to publish and do communication and also community service. So the PhD program in itself is mostly preparing students to do research. So during that time, they also need to take initiative to engage in academic writing for other, to prepare for other dimensions of the scholar profession. So let me ask you a second question here. What would be some of the challenges that you have experienced when engaged in academic writing? Are there any difficulties that you faced when you were writing any kind of papers for academia? So Margarita says time is an issue for sure. Any other thoughts?
What we have said a little bit yesterday as well, because we talked about not maybe for students, but for academics that have problems writing papers. And we said that an issue is when we do collaborative works that there might be someone that is working and others that are not. So this might be an issue.
Yeah, for sure. It's always important at the very beginning of a collaborative writing project to agree on the contribution of everyone. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will meet their engagement or their promise. But that's a discussion that is difficult to have at the beginning of a writing project, but it's very essential. It helps in the future. There are some processes in academia that will ask you to identify the percentage of your contribution for the publications on your CV. If there's more than one author in some of your publications. So I know that there's I've seen some agreements in the past, like written agreements, where there's the names of all the authors and the percentage of their contribution, and then everyone signs. So they all agree that this is how much they will have contributed. But percentage can be a bit subjective sometimes. We count it in time spent, but it could be in the number of words or the number of sections that are written as well. Not everybody will calculate the percentage in the same currency. So it could be a challenge.
I believe I would like this idea when we do something, together. Maybe we know characters as well, because it's, I don't believe that it's academic rigor or something else that permits us to give time to something. It's our character and our sense of responsibility and respecting the time of others as well. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. In my case, I faced a major blockage, a writing blockage, when I started writing my dissertation. I didn't know where to start my first chapter, and I was non-productive for a whole month trying to figure out how to just start. And until I started reading other dissertations in my field of research, and that really helped me establish a more clearer structure in my head, and I was able to start my first chapter. So there's a couple of blockages that are well known in academia, but that we don't talk about enough, I feel. The first one is the writer's block. And the writer's block actually has a scientific term to name it, and I'll put it in the chat here. It's called leukozillophobia. And it's the incapacity of starting or continue a writing project for other reasons than the lack of engagement or the lack of skills. So it means that you do have the competencies to write the paper per se, and you do have the time and you're ready to engage, but you're kind of stuck and you're not able to start or to continue. And the second blockage is often due to the imposter syndrome. And that's often something that will, that first generation university students will face. And it's when PhD students are afraid that others will realize that they're not intelligent enough to complete their projects. So it's a perception that the entourage is not seeing you having the capacity to really push through and succeed. So those two are challenges when writing academic papers. And there's different things that you can do to develop your writing competencies or overcome those blockages. So I'll just go through these quickly here, but peer review is certainly very useful for students because you have someone who's another student, maybe who's a little further on their journey that can review your text. And you don't feel like you're being assessed. It's really just a friend or a peer that is providing feedback, looking at your text from another perspective. Some students will hire writing coaches, so that exists on the market if you have the funds for it. You can peruse templates, which is what I did to overcome the blockage for my thesis or my dissertation. You can have a critical friend, so not necessarily someone who's in academia, Sometimes it's your husband or your wife or a friend who is reading your documents and just seeing if it makes sense, if they can understand your idea, even though they're not a specialist in that field. You can certainly read books on academic writing. There's a lot of them. Some are easier to digest than others. There's a belief that if you write 1 page a day, then you'll be able to finish your project much faster. That's easier said than done with our busy schedules, and you need to be in the right mindset to write as well. So it's not every day that you're able to write a page. Expert training is definitely something that could be interesting. There's workshops that are offered at universities that you can attend. Verbalize content. So just talking about what you're writing is to someone else usually really formalizes your ideas and even open doors in your brain as well for new ideas. So verbalizing is always a good thing that you can do. And even if it's not with someone else, you can also go for a walk and record yourself on your phone. And sometimes just talking while you're walking in nature, you'll have new ideas that come up as well. And the last one is writing groups, and that's really going to be the focus on the second part of my my workshop here. So there's different types of writing groups that do exist. And the one I'm going to be focusing on mostly is writing cafes, but I'll get back to the other ones towards the end so that you know the difference between all of them. So to briefly explain what writing cafes are, it's when students meet with other students in public spaces. So it could be coffee shops, it could be libraries, museums, and in those public spaces, they work on their individual projects while benefiting from the presence of others.